Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Natalia Martinez. Natalia Martinez was born in the late 1980s in Montevideo, the capital of Uruguay, and she was the youngest daughter in her family. While not much is known about her personality, she had a close relationship with her relatives, especially her older sister, Claudia. Her father was a senior salesman for a large international company that sold household appliances, which allowed the family to live comfortably. Natalia was a cheerful and friendly girl. During her teenage years, she formed a close-knit group of friends who supported one another during difficult times. These friends later described her as sociable and able to connect easily with strangers. After graduating from high school, Natalia began spending more time with her friends. They enjoyed going to various parties and eventually expanded their adventures by visiting the beaches of Uruguay for fun. To celebrate her 19th birthday on January 1st, 2007, Natalia and her friends planned a trip to La Poloma, a small resort town, where they stayed for 2 weeks. On January 16th, they traveled to a nearby resort in the city of Realis, where Natalia was delighted to meet her parents and sister, who were there for a 4-day vacation. The Natalia family had a wonderful time enjoying beach activities and were well known in the town, as they frequently visited. They often returned to the same places, making it feel like a second home. On January 18th, Natalia and her sister Claudia decided to drive to Punta del Este, another tourist town less than an hour away from Realis. They planned to stop at a popular local spa located about halfway between the two towns in the Serra San Antonio area. After their beauty treatment, the girls planned to go to a disco with 3 of Natalia's friends. However, as the evening approached, Claudia felt very tired and decided to go home to their parents. Despite this, 19-year-old Natalia Martinez was determined to stick to her plans. She wanted to enjoy herself, so she went with her friends to a popular party at the local nightclub, La Erin, Canada, where they stayed until around 5 a.m. As morning approached, the girls decided to leave the party and head home. At that time, Natalia was talking with a man named Leonardo Roccovan, an old acquaintance who owned a bookstore. They stopped near the exit and continued their conversation. However, Natalia became so engrossed in her discussion with Leonardo that her friends decided to go outside and get into the car they had arrived in, planning to head home together. The girls got tired and got into the car. One of them decided to check on Natalia, but when they returned to the nightclub, they found that Natalia and Leonardo were gone. The friends realized that Natalia could not have left alone or with anyone else without letting them know. Since they did not see her leave, they began to worry. They went up to the second floor, out of the bar, and saw Leonardo's BMW in the parking lot. The owner was inside the car, and because the windows were tinted, Rosalia and Silva could not see if anyone was in the passenger seat. However, they did notice some movement inside the car. The girls called out to Leonardo to ask about Natalia. He said he was in the car with a friend and mentioned that he had spoken to Natalia briefly before they parted ways. He claimed he had no idea what happened to her afterward or why she didn't return to her friends. The girls assumed Natalia had gone home, so they got into the car and drove to her friends' relatives, who were at the police station, just a 10-minute drive from the club. Rosalia and Silva stopped near the house and honked to get Claudia's attention, trying not to wake the entire family. However, no one responded, so they returned to the club where they last saw Natalia. The girls continued to search for their friend for about 2 hours, but their efforts were unsuccessful. No one knew where she had gone. Around 8 a.m., Silva returned home, exhausted and very worried about her missing friend. Worried about her friend's safety, she decided to tell her parents everything that had happened. She feared something bad might have happened to her friend. Her parents tried to reassure her, telling her to rest and that her friend was probably already home. So, she went to bed. Yet, when she woke up at 11 a.m. that same day, her concerns grew stronger. The entire Natalia family started searching for she. They quickly got involved, and her friends went to the club together to find out what happened. Unfortunately, they were still unsuccessful. The club was closed, and no one had any helpful information. They searched the surrounding area for clues but found nothing. Around 5 p.m., Natalia's family and friends arrived at the police station. Maldonado police investigators received several photos, including one of all the girls relaxing at a club that evening. This helped them understand what the missing girl was wearing so they could come up with a description for the search. The police took their statements seriously and began investigating. Initially, the family said that Natalia had been at a party where she may have had too much to drink and left with someone. However, Rosalia and Silva insisted that Natalia had not consumed any alcohol that night, as she often denied. They also dismissed the police's suspicions that they had used illegal drugs. Police began a search operation. They first went to the location where Natalia was last seen. The club was open, but there were no surveillance cameras at the time. Police spoke to club employees and learned that a group of 3 young men sitting at a nearby table had been trying to approach the women throughout the evening. Natalia's friends confirmed that the men had been harassing them. Despite this information, police ignored the group of young men and instead focused on the acquaintance with whom Natalia had been talking before she disappeared. It was no surprise that Leonardo immediately became the prime suspect, since he was the last person to see Natalia. However, all of Leonardo's acquaintances described him as a kind and calm person who had never shown any signs of cruelty before and was incapable of harming anyone. He was a young businessman. That night, his girlfriend waited for him in the car while he was talking to Natalia. After that, he said goodbye to Natalia and returned to the car with his girlfriend. From the car, he saw Natalia go down the stairs and go out onto the porch. From that moment on, Leonardo was distracted by his conversation with his girlfriend and did not see Natalia again. However, he was not worried about her, since he did not notice anything suspicious around. No one was screaming or making noise. Despite the police suspicions, Leonardo insisted he had nothing to do with Natalia's disappearance. However, the police did not trust him. They needed to conduct a thorough examination of the BMW he drove away in after the party. Several witnesses reported seeing a similar car in various locations around the city, including near a forest on the outskirts. One man claimed he spotted a couple having sex in a car that matched the description on the night she went missing, near a lake by the woods. Police obtained a search warrant for Leonardo's car. During the initial inspection, they found a long, dark hair on the floor of the BMW and sent it for analysis. However, it did not match Natalia. It belonged to someone else. The interior of the car showed no signs of suspicious activity, no blood, or evidence of a struggle. Police speculated that Leonardo had cleaned the car shortly after Natalia Martinez disappeared, which would explain the clean condition of the car. Police used this detail as part of the evidence against Leonardo. However, they still lacked the evidence to arrest him. On January 22nd, a passerby driving on the outskirts of Polis discovered several items on the roadside. Among them were a woman's handbag containing a wallet and a pair of women's shoes. The most crucial piece of evidence was linked to Natalia Martinez, a case that was currently receiving significant media attention. Recognizing the situation, the witness promptly contacted the police. Unfortunately, the media coverage also led to the spread of various rumors, which Natalia's family had to repeatedly deny. One such rumor suggested that Natalia was involved with drug dealers, implying that she had become a victim of criminal activities. However, Natalia's father publicly refuted these claims in an official television statement. Despite the situation, rumors continued to spread. Some claimed to have witnessed her being attacked or even murdered. Instead of receiving assistance from the media, police found themselves overwhelmed by numerous false testimonies each day that needed to be verified, complicating the investigation. Meanwhile, the media eagerly reported even the most outrageous theories. The story was considered compelling and attracted many readers, causing journalists to add fuel to the fire of chaos surrounding the case. The rumors about the missing girl were leveraged to boost newspaper sales. Natalia's family endured immense pain following her disappearance. A large-scale search operation was organized, involving many police officers, friends, family members, and hundreds of volunteers. It was quickly determined that there was no evidence of the girl near the nightclub, prompting the search to extend into more distant areas of Uruguay. Ultimately, the entire coast was thoroughly searched. Most of the search operations took place on land, using service dogs, and later involving military and civilian aircraft. The City Fire Brigade also participated in the search and requested that the sewer systems be inspected. However, no traces of Natalia were found there either. By this point, law enforcement had largely concluded that Natalia was deceased, as the likelihood of finding her alive was very low. The critical window for finding missing persons is usually 48 hours. A significant finding occurred when a bone was discovered on the Grande Plateau, but tests revealed it was not human. Although the search had stalled and no new leads had emerged, Natalia's relatives continued their efforts. They remained hopeful that she was alive and being held against her will. In 2000, a female body was discovered in the forest near Lake Yolo. The body was in poor condition and was sent for examination to determine the identity of the deceased. This location was several kilometers from the club where Natalia was last seen, and the clothing found on the body led police to suspect it might belong to the missing Natalia Martinez. After the discovery of the body, police remembered a couple who had been seen having sex in a car near the forest, which drew attention to that area. The forensic expert who performed the autopsy struggled to gather important information because the body was in an advanced state of decomposition. To ensure a thorough examination, 5 forensic experts were called in. They determined that the body belonged to Natalia Martinez. Their overall assessments suggested that she likely did not die of natural causes, as there were faint signs of strangulation on her neck. Although they ruled out poisoning from substances or alcohol, they could not find evidence of physical or sexual violence due to the body's condition. It was noteworthy that the victim was found tied with nylon thread, but it remained unclear whether this occurred before or after her death. Several months later, while the investigation continued, an unexpected development arose. The man who had found her belongings on the roadside was discovered dead at the bottom of a cliff near his home. His name was initially kept confidential. Initially, it appeared that the man had voluntarily chosen to end his life. However, all his relatives insisted that he would never do such a thing. He was a deeply religious man, cherished his life, and loved his family. An autopsy revealed that the cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head, sustained long before the fall from the cliff, suggesting he had been thrown off. This led police to believe the two cases were linked. But more evidence was needed. The next tragic event involved Natalia's father, Ever Martinez. He had fallen into a deep depression after his daughter's death and the damaging rumors that were circulating about their family. He ended his life at home by shooting himself in the head. His body was discovered by his daughter Claudia and his wife. The police closed the case after confirming that he had acted alone, a conclusion that the family accepted. For a long time, police struggled to make progress in the investigation into Natalia's murder. However, new information emerged from text messages exchanged with a friend just days before Natalia's death. In these conversations, Natalia mentioned a man she had recently met online. It was later discovered that he was one of the men who had been at the nightclub on the day Natalia went missing. These three young men were sitting at a nearby table, and several witnesses had pointed them out from the beginning of the investigation, but this information was overlooked. Police identified all three suspects, who were slightly older than Natalia. After interviewing them, the police became even more suspicious of their involvement, as the men contradicted each other in their statements about where they were and what they did during the night and morning of that tragic day. After this, the police interviewed a witness whose identity was kept confidential for her safety. She was the girlfriend of one of the men who had been arrested. Her testimony revealed that a young man in the group, Rodrigo Verghese, was involved in Natalia's murder. At the time, he was 25 years old, and police later stated that he had previously provided false statements. During the interrogation, police recorded phone conversations that implicated the Rodrigo main suspect. They collected DNA samples from him, but these were not helpful for the investigation due to the advanced decomposition of the remains. After that, the police reached out to the friends and relatives of the Rodrigo. A young man was called to testify on June 8, 2010, along with his friends who had been at a nightclub on the night of Natalia's murder. They all claimed they had no involvement in the incident. They stated that after spending the night at the club, they hired a sex worker to join them in their continued festivities. However, they denied any connection to Natalia. Rodrigo, the prime suspect, denied spending time with the murdered woman and claimed he did not know her. However, messages from the girl revealed that they had spoken online and planned to meet at a party, suggesting that Rodrigo had lied. Initial questioning did not turn up any clues, but a day later, police spoke to the young people again in the hope of getting a confession. This time, Rodrigo confessed. He explained that he had met Natalia online and after chatting for a while, they decided to meet at a club. Unfortunately, their conversation did not go well, and as dawn approached, he suggested they go to another nearby nightclub. Rodrigo misled her. He wanted to be alone with her. During this time, he began to harass her, according to his confession. When she rejected his advances, he seemed to accept it. However, Natalia then suffered an asthma attack, which led to convulsions and ultimately her death, as she did not have her inhaler or any medication with her. Rodrigo was confused and unable to help her. He stated that he panicked during her attack and didn't know what to do, especially when she stopped showing signs of life in his car. After the party, he planned to return to his family's farm, a short distance from the city. However, after Natalia's death, he decided to dispose of her body to avoid any further repercussions. He headed for the woods, thinking it would be a good place to hide her. There, he tied Natalia up, dragged her deeper into the woods, and covered her body with branches. But this was only part of the story. A witness walking along the beach claimed to have seen a couple having sex, and Natalia's body showed signs of strangulation. It seems that Rodrigo neglected to mention that he had strangled and raped her at the same time. Police were later able to confirm that Rodrigo's other friends were not involved in the incident, so they were released shortly after Rodrigo confessed. Rodrigo was formally charged with murder and taken into custody. After the confession, it appeared that the prosecutor's office would easily prove the Rodrigo's guilt. However, in mid-2010, as preliminary hearings began, Rodrigo Verghese recanted his confession. He claimed he admitted to the murder under police pressure and insisted he did not commit the crime. This assertion seemed unlikely because his confession included numerous details only the actual killer would know, including the precise location where the girl's body was found. Still, Rodrigo maintained his innocence. Despite the evidence against him, his defense team supported his statement and sought to demonstrate that Rodrigo was not at the club that night. They presented mobile phone data and a statement from his employer confirming that he had been working his usual evening shift that day. The next day, he attended a friend's wedding, and no one noticed anything unusual about his behavior. On September 2, 2010, Leonardo Roccovan, the bookstore owner who was initially the main suspect in the investigation, was called as a key witness for the prosecution. Leonardo testified that during a conversation, he had an argument with a young man. Leonardo identified the young man as Rodrigo. This indicated that Rodrigo was definitely at the nightclub and not at work. Natalia's friends also confirmed that he was at the nightclub that night. Forensic experts, working with the prosecution, provided insights based on the autopsy results. They noted that, due to the typical symptoms of asthma, the girl could not have died from an asthma attack so quickly. While she did experience an asthma attack, it could not have occurred instantaneously. It took several hours. Additionally, there were signs of strangulation on the victim's neck, which was likely the cause of death. Unfortunately, the experts could not provide further details about the victim's injuries. From late August to mid-September 2010, the prosecution successfully constructed a narrative of the crime, leading to Rodrigo Verghese being found guilty of Natalia Martinez's murder. He received a 9-year prison sentence. However, in February 2011, Rodrigo's lawyer submitted an appeal, claiming that the court's ruling was incorrect and that the prosecution was biased. The lawyer argued that they failed to present a witness to the kidnapping or murder, nor did they provide any compelling direct evidence. Natalia's family expressed disappointment, saying that the criminal received a lighter sentence than the family had expected. Disappointed by this leniency, Natalia's relatives filed a civil lawsuit against Rodrigo Verghese for causing harm to Natalia's family, holding him responsible for her father's death. Initially, they mentioned that Rodrigo should pay $15 in damages. However, after further discussion, both parties agreed to increase the amount of damages to $7,000. The court rejected the request for a longer sentence. On October 27, 2014, the lawyer achieved his goal when Rodrigo, 29, was pardoned after serving only 4 years and 2 months in prison. His release was largely due to his good behavior while in custody. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Daniel Wozniak. Costa Mesa, California, is located between Los Angeles and San Diego on a coastal plateau overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Despite being an affluent area, it still retains the laid-back atmosphere of a beach town. No one expected this picturesque location to be the site of Julie Kibushi's tragic fate. Sam Har's parents, Stephen and Raquel, were worried when they realized they hadn't heard from him in a while. Sam was scheduled to visit them that weekend, but he never arrived. On May 22, 2010, his parents Stephen and Raquel went to Sam's apartment. When they arrived, they witnessed a horrifying scene. Stephen, in a panic, quickly called 911. During the call, he informed the police that there was a dead woman lying face down in his son's bedroom, her clothes partially torn and blood dripping from her forehead. "Do you know where your son is?" the dispatcher asked. "No, I don't," came the reply. But there was no sign of Sam anywhere. The case shocked the Costa Mesa community, where homicides are extremely rare. When police arrived at the apartment, they found no evidence of a struggle. The apartment was neat and showed no signs of a struggle. The space contained typical bachelor items like empty beer bottles, used cigarettes, and an outdoor grill, all of which were relatively clean and tidy. Until they entered the bedroom. In the bedroom, police found an unused knife on the nightstand and several books, including a fighting manual and another titled The Wonders of Sex. The most alarming discovery, however, was on the bed. It was covered in the victim's blood. The dead woman was lying partly on the bed and partly on the floor, her pants down, exposing her lower body. Police believe she may have been sexually assaulted before her death. She died of 2 gunshot wounds to the head, 1 to the top of her head. Although there was a knife on the nightstand, it did not appear to have been used. Curiously, she was wearing a crown, and the back of her sweater read, "All yours." Her purse was in the kitchen, and her driver's license identified the victim as 23-year-old Julie Kabushi. Julie was born on Valentine's Day 1987 to Japanese-American parents Jun and Masa Kabushi. She was the third of their 4 children. Her parents often called her "my Valentine girl." From an early age, Julie developed a strong interest in dance and music. Her mother said that Julie started tap dancing at the age of 5, and her passion for the sport continued to grow over the years. According to her friends and family, she was a very cheerful person. Her cheerful and bubbly personality brought laughter to everyone. She radiated positivity and often helped her friends when they were in trouble. While respecting her Japanese heritage, she also pursued a free-spirited, all-American lifestyle. After graduating from the Orange County School of the Arts, Julie pursued fashion design at Orange Coast Community College. There, she formed a close relationship with 26-year-old Sam Har and even tutored him in anthropology. Little did she know that her kindness would eventually lead to her tragic fate. As the police investigated the crime scene, they attempted to discover what happened to this energetic young woman, Julie. The evidence clearly pointed to Sam as her killer. Since she was found in his apartment and he was now missing, the police needed to dig deeper into Sam Har's life. Sam Har was born on May 29, 1983, in Los Angeles, California, to Stephen and Raquel Kalberman. As an only child, he received a lot of affection from his parents. His father was a special education teacher while his mother stayed home. Sam had a close relationship with his parents and visited them often. Sam was large and athletic, and friends described him as a big teddy bear. As a child, he enlisted in the United States Army, serving a tour of duty in both Afghanistan and Germany with the 173rd Airborne Division. After 3 years of service, he was discharged and returned to Southern California to take advantage of the GI Bill and finish college. Sam aimed to finish college and then re-enlist in the Army as an officer. Sam enrolled in Orange Coast Community College there. He became friends with Julie, who was 3 years younger than him. However, after 3 years in the Army, Sam developed PTSD, a common condition among veterans. Police wondered if he had lost control and committed the crime in a moment of intense emotion. When Julie was found dead in Sam's apartment and he was missing, detectives suspected that he had fled the scene after the murder. The situation became more suspicious when they discovered text messages on Julie's phone from Sam. At around 2:45 p.m. on May 21, 2010, Sam texted Julie to say he was going to help a friend and then come to his parents' house. However, just 2 hours later, his text messages changed. He contacted her multiple times, begging her to come over. The urgency in his messages made it clear that something was wrong. Concerned about her friend, Julie agreed to visit him, expressing her willingness to support him as family. Sam's messages showed that he had planned her visit. Furthermore, Sam's car and passport were missing from the apartment, leading the police to suspect that he was trying to evade arrest. With both his passport and car missing, it seemed that Sam would soon be identified as the killer. However, the police would soon discover that the situation was more complicated than it appeared. Back in 2002, when Sam was 18, he was charged with the murder along with 17 others in the stabbing and beating death of 19-year-old Byron Benito in Canyon Country. On January 15, 2002, Sam, who had known Byron since childhood, picked him up and took him to a location behind a mobile home park where a group of suspected gang members attacked and killed Byron. Although Sam was charged with murder, he was eventually acquitted, but this did not ease the police's suspicions of him. Sam's family believes in his innocence, but the police believe they are after the right suspect. Since Sam is trained in the use of firearms, he will be armed. Fearing that they are dealing with a dangerous criminal, the police issue a warrant for Sam's arrest. Meanwhile, Costa Mesa police begin monitoring Sam's cell phone and credit card transactions to find him. They learn that he has made 4 ATM withdrawals since his disappearance. Additionally, his credit card was used at a pizza delivery restaurant in Long Beach, California, just 20 miles from Sam's home. The police hoped to find Sam on surveillance footage, but when the bank provided the ATM recording, they were shocked to see a teenager in a hoodie and baseball cap withdrawing money from Sam's bank account. Neither the police nor Sam's parents were able to identify the teenager. Police believe he may be helping Sam escape or hide. Costa Mesa police are eager to find him. On May 26, 2010, police learned that Sam's credit card had been used at another pizza delivery service and began tracking the delivery driver. After obtaining the delivery address, they rushed to the location, thinking they had finally found Sam's hideout. However, when police raided the home, they did not find Sam, but instead found 17-year-old Wesley Freelich and several of his friends. Despite being suspected, police immediately ruled Wesley out as a suspect, but he still had Sam's credit card on him. Wesley shared a surprising story that police did not expect. He revealed that he had received a credit card with instructions to withdraw cash, but that the card was not given to him by Sam, and he said Daniel Wozniak, a local stage actor Wesley met through community theater, had given him a credit card. Daniel claimed to be a bail bondsman who needed to collect money that Sam owed. While most people might have refused, Wesley saw Daniel as a brother and, not realizing the severity of the situation, agreed to help. In total, $1,900 was withdrawn from the account. Daniel Wozniak's name came to the attention of the police when they discovered an invitation to Daniel's upcoming wedding in Sam's apartment. But who is Daniel really, and what is his relationship to Sam? Did he help Sam escape, or was he involved in the murder? Many questions remain unanswered. Daniel Wozniak, born March 23, 1984, is the youngest of 3 brothers. Because his parents worked long hours, he spent a lot of time with his grandparents after school. Growing up in a wealthy family, Daniel and his family often went on lavish vacations. He was considered a good student at school, getting top grades most of the time. He used pranks, singing, dancing, and magic tricks to attract people's attention. He loved being the center of attention. Realizing that he had a talent for performing on stage, Daniel began acting and singing in musicals in his early 20s. He was quite open-minded about his plans for the future, but was never able to hold down a job for long, forcing him to move from job to job with very low pay. However, he kept his passion for acting and continued to participate in theater. It was in one of these musicals that he met his dream partner, an actress. After a short period of dating, they decided to marry on May 26, 2010. The police found Daniel while he was celebrating his bachelor party in Huntington Beach, California. He was related to Sam Hart because they lived in the same apartment complex. The police suspected that Daniel may have helped Sam escape or hide, or that he was involved in Julie's murder. With an arrest warrant in hand, the police interrupted Daniel's bachelor party. His expression changed when he saw the police, and they took him into custody for questioning. In the interrogation room, Wozniak initially claimed that his only crime was participating in credit card fraud and covering up for Sam. He explained to the police that he and Sam had planned to drain his bank account with Wesley's help and then claimed that he had stolen the credit cards. However, Daniel claimed that before they could carry out their plan, Sam made a shocking confession. He added that after this confession, he dropped Sam off at a local shopping mall and had not seen him since. However, the police believed that he was still covering for Sam and that he had more to do with Julie's murder than he had told them. The police changed their approach by taking a DNA sample from Daniel, which made him appear nervous. As he tried to remain calm, the police sensed that something was wrong. Almost immediately, he began adding more details to his statement. The police asked, "Can you explain what happened to Sam?" Daniel replied, "I told him I needed to move some objects in the theater. I said, 'Lift this up,' and as he bent down, I grabbed the gun. I had never fired a gun before, so I pulled the trigger and shot him." The police realized that Daniel is worried that his DNA might be found at Sam's apartment, despite his attempts to downplay the issue. Under pressure, he continually changes his story. After a brief silence, Daniel says that he knows about Julie's murder and that he helped Sam escape. When the police remind him that they have his DNA, he insists that it does not match anything on Julie's body, insisting that he had nothing to do with the murder. The police expect him to share more information, but he abruptly decides to end the interview. Knowing the seriousness of the situation, the police press him for more information, warning that he will be arrested for accessory to murder if he does not come clean and give them full details. Daniel also has a lot at stake. He has a wedding scheduled in just 48 hours and he does not want to miss it. Under pressure, he began to collapse, causing the situation to change. The police, noticing his distress, rushed into questioning by falsely claiming that they had found his DNA on Julie's body. In reality, it took weeks for the DNA test results to come back, but Daniel did not dispute this claim. Instead, he explained that his DNA was present because he had been right above her. When his fabrications were exposed, he made a startling confession. This alarmed the police because initially only one gunshot wound was found at the crime scene. It was only after an autopsy that a second gunshot wound was discovered. Daniel's confession meant that he had been present when she was killed, making him an accomplice to the murder, allowing the police to formally arrest him. Even though Daniel was in custody, the police still needed to locate Sam, and Daniel remained silent as they searched for clues about Sam. While in prison, Daniel called his fiancée, Rachel Buffett. When Rachel chose freedom over love, she told him that she would speak to the police about the case. Daniel knew that he had to talk to the police before Rachel did. Suddenly, he panicked, desperate to reach a deal with the police that he had refused to do just hours before. But what he told the police this time was beyond their imagination. The story begins on May 21, 2010, when Daniel asks Sam to help him with a task, moving some boxes in the attic of a theater at a local military base. While Sam is busy moving the boxes and his back is turned, Daniel suddenly pulls out a gun and shoots Sam in the head. At first, Sam doesn't know what happened, but when he realizes he's been shot, he begs Daniel for help. Without hesitation, Daniel loads the gun and shoots Sam a second time, killing him on the spot. After killing Sam, Daniel proceeds to send Julie messages from Sam's phone, inviting her to Sam's apartment. Without any remorse, he leaves Sam's body in the attic and spends the night laughing, singing, and dancing, as if he hadn't just taken an innocent life. That night, Daniel returns to the apartment and when Julie arrives, he shoots her twice in the head. He then staged the crime scene to make it appear as if Sam had attacked and killed Julie before fleeing. Daniel was also determined to hide Sam's body. In a desperate and gruesome act, he returned to the loft and cut off Sam's hands and head to conceal his identity. He dumped the body in a nearby park. Despite these horrific actions, Daniel returned to the theater as if nothing had happened. Police later found photos from the film's parties showing him laughing and joking with other members of the crew. The motive for these shocking murders was even more disturbing. It was all about money. Daniel had been struggling financially for a long time and was facing eviction, having been 2 months behind on his rent. He also had no way to pay for the lavish wedding honeymoon he had planned. When Daniel discovers that Sam has $62,000 in savings from his time in the military, he makes the cold-blooded decision to kill 2 innocent people to fund his lavish wedding and vacation. When the police discover the backpack containing the evidence Rachel mentioned to Daniel, it becomes clear just how damaging its contents can be. Daniel's brother, Tim, was told to get rid of the backpack but instead threw it over the fence at their parents' house. The backpack contained a number of incriminating items, including Sam's financial information, passport, bloody clothing, and most importantly, the murder weapon. Daniel's DNA was found on these items, placing him solely responsible for the murders of Julie and Sam. The evidence was overwhelming, including DNA, spent shell casings, and the victim's financial records, everything the prosecutor could possibly need, including the murder weapon itself. On December 16, 2015, after a trial that lasted just 5 days, Daniel Wozniak was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder. On January 11, 2016, after just 1 hour of deliberation, one of the shortest death penalty trials ever, the jury recommended the death penalty for Daniel Wozniak. On September 23, 2016, the judge sentenced him to death. It seemed there was no end to the deception in this case. Years later, police discovered that Daniel's ex-fiancée, Rachel Buffett, not only knew about the murder plots, but also lied to the police. Although she denied all charges, she was arrested and charged with 3 felony counts of being an accessory after the fact, based on allegations that she had repeatedly lied to the police. On September 12, 2018, she was convicted of 2 of those charges, carrying a maximum possible sentence of 44 months. On November 8, 2018, she was sentenced to 32 months in prison and was released from prison in about 2019. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Jennifer Cronin. Jennifer Cronin and her daughter Susan lived in Essex, England. Jennifer was deeply devoted to her family and children. She was a kind, warm, and caring person who had a very attached relationship with Susan. They loved and admired each other greatly. This makes her cherish and appreciate their relationship. She grew up with a big dream, to one day having a family of her own, and children who would love and admire her just as she admired her own parents. In 1990, Susan was dating Kieran Lynch, a young bricklayer 3 years her senior. At the time, Susan was working as an apprentice hairdresser, known for her distinct style. Susan's friends were impressed by how Kieran treated her, often remarking that he seemed to adore her. Their relationship blossomed, and the couple got married in 1994. It was important to Susan that Kieran got along with her parents, which he did. In fact, Kieran quickly formed a close bond with wife's mother, Jennifer. Kieran and Susan had 2 daughters, Matilda and Molly, who were very close to their grandparents and visited them at least twice a week. As soon as they heard grandmother's, Jennifer, gentle voice, the girls would excitedly run to her. When they were young, they looked up to their father as a perfect role model, the most kind-hearted and generous man they knew. Despite his busy work schedule, Kieran made time for his daughters, using all his free time to be with them. However, there was another side to his personality. He was highly competitive and always strived to be the best in everything he did and had a desire to be in control, creating a perfect image of their family. Kieran struggled to cope with the stress of supporting his wife and 2 daughters. As a result, he often lashed out in anger, damaging things and creating chaos. Over time, his behavior worsened, especially when he had been drinking. His temper tantrums became more aggressive and intense, causing his daughters to view him in a different light. They vividly remembered the incidents when their intoxicated father would shout, criticize, and eventually turn violent, smashing plates, slamming doors, and overturning furniture. In times of turmoil, the girls would find a safe haven, hiding from their angry father until he fell asleep. They moved quietly around the house, making sure not to wake him. After these tantrums, Kieran would often feel guilty and try to make amends. He would fix the things he had broken the day before and attempt to explain why he had acted that way. He would sincerely apologize to his wife and daughters, promising that it wouldn't happen again. However, he never changed, and then the same thing happened again and again. Like many people experiencing domestic violence, Susan felt deeply ashamed and humiliated, which led her to conceal the turmoil at home from everyone. Despite trying to appear strong in front of her daughters, Susan would often break down in tears at night, confused and hurt by the transformation of her loving partner into an overbearing and controlling presence. Whenever Kieran came home in a bad mood, Susan and her daughters would make to close the windows so the neighbors wouldn't hear the loud arguments. Even the smallest thing could make Kieran become angry. If Susan was late coming home from work, Kieran would search the town for her. When the daughters grew up, they started to stand up to their father when he was being cruel to their mother, Susan. At first, this seemed to make Kieran behave better. However, one serious incident happened when Kieran, angry, almost hit his daughter, who stepped in to protect her mother, Susan. Although the family tried to hide their problems from those around them, the truth was eventually exposed. In 2015, people close to Kieran noticed a significant change in his behavior and appearance. A friend who hadn't seen him in months was shocked, and they met unexpectedly in the city. Kieran had lost significant weight and looked gaunt. His demeanor seemed distant and contemplative. It wasn't long before the cause of these changes became clear. While doing laundry, Susan found a packet of white powder in a small tube in Kieran's work clothes that she was washing. This discovery explained Kieran's recent erratic behavior, and it filled Susan with fear. Susan confronted her husband via text, lamenting his choices and saying he valued them more than family. Kieran didn't make any excuses but instead asked Susan not to discuss the matter with their daughters. When a large amounts of money started to disappear from their credit card, Susan tried to talk to Kieran about it, but he became defensive and aggressive. As a result, the home environment became increasingly tense and strained. Kieran's behavior becomes more and more scary. One time, while their daughters were away, he put a knife to Susan's throat and threatened to end both their lives. On another occasion, he set up a noose in the attic. As these frightening incidents grew more frequent, Susan realized that if she didn't act, the situation could have disastrous consequences. Despite her desire to protect her family, Susan found it hard to open up to her own mother, Jennifer, because she doesn't want her mother to be sad. However, Susan knew she had to take decisive action to change their situation. In November 2016, after 24 years of marriage, Susan and Kieran decided to separate. Kieran made the difficult decision to leave the family home and move back in with his parents. Susan understood that this was for the best, because their daughters are grown up and they should no longer endure their father's noisy arguments. Her top priority was the well-being of their children. The separation occurred with minimal conflict, and Susan was relieved, although she also felt guilty for not taking action sooner. However, it did Susan know that Kieran had no intention of giving up. After Kieran left, as the tension in the house finally dissipated, life started to get better, and for the first time in a long while, Susan felt happy again. She and her daughters were able to have normal conversations, watch movies together, laugh, and enjoy life without any stress. The worry about how Kieran would behave when he came home from work was gone. Susan realized that she was still attractive for men, and her confidence grew over time. People noticed that Kieran seemed to be moving on with his life, and Susan was glad that he had made some positive changes. Even though they were no longer together, Susan appreciated that Kieran was still a part of his children's lives. Susan had a tough time in her past relationships, so she was hesitant to get close to someone new. That was until she met Mike. As she slowly opened up to him, she shared stories about her previous, including her difficult past with her ex-husband, Kieran. To move forward, Susan knew she needed to finalize her divorce. Despite being nervous about Kieran's unpredictable behavior, she decided to take the first step by texting him to meet at a cafe to discuss their divorce. To her surprise, the encounter went smoothly. Kieran seemed to accept the idea of a divorce. And for once, They had a friendly conversation, reminiscing about their past experiences. They even exchanged kind text messages afterward, with Kieran expressing happiness for Susan's new relationship and Susan hoping he would find love soon. However, the next day, Susan received a barrage of messages from Kieran, and his attitude toward the divorce had taken a drastic turn. He now acted like he didn't care about his ex-wife, but he still had some demands. He wanted $60,000 in exchange for signing the divorce papers. Kieran argued that he had already left her the house and its contents, and therefore, he was entitled to compensation. But what worried her was Kieran's attitude in letting her move on. He couldn't stand the thought of another man replacing him. His texts even reveal a dark desire, her demise. At first, Kieran only threatened through text messages, but then he showed it through actions. He appeared in Susan's yard with a hammer, while she was home alone with her pet. Susan quickly called to request emergency assistance. By the time the police arrived, Kieran had already damaged some flower pots and outdoor decorations, but he had left the scene. 2 officers entered the property and listened to Susan's account. Kieran returned, loudly proclaiming his intent to confront his ex-wife, Susan, and said that no one could stop him. The police arrested Kieran for disturbing the peace. Even in handcuffs, he continued to insult his ex-wife. As a result, Kieran faced charges on 3 counts, making life-threatening actions, carrying a dangerous object, and causing property damage. On January 29, 2018, Kieran appeared in magistrate's court and denied all allegations against him. He was scheduled to appear in court again on March 29 and was released on bail under the condition that he avoid contact with Susan and stay away from her home. However, this decision left Susan and her daughters feeling uneasy and questioning the law's effectiveness in protecting them. Kieran disregarded the bail conditions and continued to contact Susan, violating the no-contact order. He repeatedly called her and even showed up at her residence, which intensified her fear for her safety. He falsely claimed to mutual friends that Susan's new boyfriend was sending him provocative messages. Kieran also targeted his daughters by contacting them, knowing they would inform Susan about his actions. Susan was on high alert at all times, worried about leaving her children alone due to Kieran's persistent calls, which sometimes exceeded 80 a day. These frequent calls often involved threats of him showing up at her location. When Kieran failed to comply with his bail conditions, Susan contacted the authorities again. During this time, Kieran made a concerning call to the emergency services and revealed that he tried to end his life but did not have the courage to do so. A team of psychologists and police officers was sent to engage with him. Upon their arrival, Kieran assured them he was fine, and as a result, he was advised to schedule an appointment with his family doctor. At the time, he did not appear to have any mental health problems. Kieran continued to harass Susan and family with calls and messages. He took invading their personal space. He snuck into the garage and cut off the power supply. He also tampered with the garden hose at Susan's mother's, Jennifer, house and would sometimes lurk under the windows at night. His actions caused fear in Susan, their daughters, and even her elderly mother, Jennifer. Despite Susan's repeated pleas for help, but the police were of no help to her. When they arrived, they took statements and promised to make and arrest Kieran, but they failed to do so. The police considered this a normal dispute between people going through a divorce, and they did not realize the seriousness of the situation. However, things took a darker turn when Kieran contacted his eldest daughter and made threats to sexually assault her. When Susan found out, she was horrified. The police launched a search for Kieran at his home but couldn't find him. They advised Susan and her daughters to go to a friend's house or to Jennifer's house to avoid having to stay home alone. Youngest daughter Matilda stayed at a friend's house, while the oldest daughter, Molly, went to visit her grandmother, Jennifer, who lived alone after her husband passed away. Molly and her grandmother, Jennifer, spent a peaceful evening together, watching TV, drinking tea, and chatting. For a short time, they were able to forget about Kieran's threatening behavior. However, when they went to bed, the phone started ringing. When Jennifer answered, there was complete silence on the other end, and she thought it was a wrong number. Nevertheless, the phone continued to ring repeatedly. Susan and Molly were anxious and uneasy due to the phone calls this continuous. Molly felt like someone was hiding in the garden. A shadowy figure appeared outside against the dark background. For safety, Molly locked themselves in the bathroom with Jennifer. It was around 2 a.m. Meanwhile, Susan's phone was flooding with more calls and texts, so she also contacted the police for help. Unfortunately, the police had limited resources and couldn't keep a constant watch for the person making the calls. They advised Susan to turn off her phone and make sure all doors and windows were securely locked. In the past 24 hours, the police had received 6 ask-for-help calls. However, the authorities claimed they didn't have enough personnel to send a patrol. On March 13, 2018, as her granddaughter left the house, Susan decided to visit her mother, Jennifer. She wanted to offer her mother comfort and reassurance, and she promised her mother that she would not stand by while her family was bullied and threatened by someone who did not accept their divorce. At 72, Jennifer stepped out into the garden with her dog, enjoying the warm daylight. From inside, her daughter Susan watched with a smile, happy to see her mother happy. Abruptly, a loud noise was heard from outside at 10:48 a.m. Kieran entered the garden with a container of flammable liquid. He yelled angry insults at his mother-in-law, Jennifer. Then he approached Jennifer, pouring the liquid on her head, face, and back. Jennifer was terrified and screamed as he continued. Susan quickly called the emergency services, asking for help. The operator told her to run out into the street to get away from Kieran, which she did right away. Susan sprinted to the end of the street and looked back, but no one was chasing her. Remembering her mother was still in the garden, she quickly turned around to return home. Just then, Kieran poured the remaining liquid on himself and lit it with a lighter. Flames erupted, engulfing he and Jennifer. Police, firefighters, and medical staff, along with an ambulance, quickly arrived at the scene. When Susan returned to her mother's garden, she was horrified by what she saw. Her mother and Kieran were badly disfigured. Her mother, Jennifer, had severe burns. Her hair, eyebrows, and eyelashes were completely gone. And her skin was badly charred. Despite being in agony, Jennifer made it clear to Susan how much she loved her and that Susan and her children meant everything to her. Even in her critical condition, Jennifer tried to comfort Susan, reassuring her that everything would be okay. Kieran was severely injured with burns covering his entire body. He was sitting against a wall, gasping for air and still smoldering from the fire. Susan was consumed by grief and anger, lashing out at Kieran for his actions. She was struggling to understand how the man she once married could cause so much harm to her mother, whom she loved and protected dearly, and couldn't fathom how their relationship had ended in such a tragic way. Kieran was arrested on suspicion of trying to kill Jennifer Cronin. Both Kieran and Jennifer were taken to the hospital with serious injuries. A few hours after the attack, Susan was called in for an interview to help figure out what happened. It was discovered that Kieran had doused himself and Jennifer with a flammable liquid and set them on fire in the garden. Kieran, a 50-year-old man, was going through a difficult divorce from his wife, Susan. She had repeatedly informed the authorities about his aggressive behavior, which was made worse by his use of illegal drugs. However, due to a lack of police resources, the situation spiraled out of control, leading to disastrous consequences. As a result, the incident quickly gained media attention, and the lack of decisive action by law enforcement was heavily criticized. The medical team informed Susan that Kieran's condition was extremely serious, with severe burns covering almost his entire body. This devastating news affected his daughters deeply, who remembered their father as a loving and caring person. One of them wanted to visit him one last time before he passed away. However, due to the extent of his injuries, only the tip of his nose was recognizable, and it had turned black from the burns. During this final visit, the daughter expressed her love for her father and mourned the tragic circumstances. A toxicology report later revealed that Kieran's body contained both alcohol and illicit substances. Meanwhile, Jennifer was also fighting for her life in the intensive care unit, with burns covering about a third of her body, mainly on her upper body and head. Despite undergoing surgical procedures, her chances of recovery were low due to the severity of her injuries. Susan visited her mother, Jennifer, in the hospital frequently, where she saw her mother's immense suffering. As the situation seemed hopeless, Susan had come to accept that her mother's passing was near and wished for her to be with her late husband, free from pain and discomfort. Unfortunately, Susan's mother only had a short time left. After 17 days, she passed away on March 30, 2018, at 1332, with her family by her side. Although her time was almost up, her face remained peaceful. Susan held her mother's hand as she took her last breath, bringing an end to her mother's life on Earth. On January 21, 2019, an in-depth investigation began at County Hall in Chelmsford, aiming to understand the incidents that led to the deaths of Jennifer Cronin, 72, and Kieran Lynch, 50. Susan, who was deeply affected by these losses, initially felt angry towards her ex-husband, Kieran. However, the investigation showed that law enforcement did not handle the situation well, so Susan's anger shifted towards them. Although Susan was aware of Kieran's unstable behavior, she had not anticipated that it would result in harm to her family. Susan publicly expressed her dissatisfaction with the authorities' handling of their situation, criticizing the police for their inadequate response and unkept promises. Specifically, she pointed out that Kieran's failure to be held accountable for breaching his bail conditions contributed to the tragic outcome of Jennifer's life. Susan hoped that this incident would serve as a lesson to the authorities, preventing similar tragedies from occurring in the future. She emphasized that the police have a fundamental responsibility to protect and serve the community, a duty that she felt was severely neglected in her family's case. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Denise Huskins. In the late hours of Sunday, March 22, 2015, 29-year-old Denise Huskins was alone in her Vallejo apartment in the San Francisco Bay Area of California. She had planned to spend the evening by herself, but her phone buzzed with a message from her ex-boyfriend, Aaron Quinn, asking to meet up for a discussion. Denise felt apprehensive, especially since they had ended relationship and she was hesitant to engage with him due to his past actions. Denise initially declined, telling Aaron it was too late and suggesting they talk another time. However, after receiving another message from him, she sat on sofa, contemplating her next move, and she thought about how she had met Aaron last summer. Originally from Boston, Massachusetts, Denise had a doctorate in physical therapy and had moved to Vallejo to join Kaiser Hospital, which specialized in treating individuals with head and spinal injuries. It was there that she met Aaron, a tall, athletic man with dark hair and striking eyes. Denise and Aaron quickly got acquainted and started chatting with each other. At first, they shared stories about their past. Aaron had been engaged before, but the relationship ended when he found out his fiancée had cheated on him. Denise listened and showed sympathy, but she found herself developing feelings for him too. As they spent more time together, their friendship has turned into love. By autumn 2014, they were officially a couple. However, things took a turn in March 2015, when Denise discovered that Aaron was secretly reaching out to his ex-fiancée, asking her to take him back. This revelation upset Denise deeply, and she decided to cut ties with him altogether. Even though she knew they had many common interests and had considered getting married, this fact still hurt her a lot. The feeling of betrayal and hurt overshadowed her love for Aaron, leaving her heart aching. She tried to ignore the stream of texts from Aaron. He asking to meet up and discuss their situation. His persistence left Denise torn and uncertain. Although her heart was still hurting, under his persistent persuasion, Denise began to feel shaken, and she gave in and agreed to meet. Denise got up from her sofa and prepared to leave her residence. At around 5:30 p.m., she got in the car and then, on the way, she stopped to buy a pizza. When she arrived at Aaron's two-story house on the 500 block of Kirkland Avenue, she collected the pizza from the passenger seat and took her purse before approaching the entrance. The next day, a workday for both of them at the hospital, Aaron called in sick at around 7 a.m., claiming illness. Denise also texted her supervisor, said she would be absent that week because she had family matters to attend to. This was an unusual thing for Denise, as she had never missed a day of work before. Denise's supervisor reminded her about the upcoming deadline for a scholarship, but she didn't respond. He assumed that something serious must have happened in her family. On the following Monday, when Aaron and Denise didn't show up to work, the Vallejo Police Department received a call from 30-year-old Aaron. His story was confusing and hard to believe. When the officers arrived at the scene, they found a strong chemical smell and many empty beer containers. Aaron also appeared disheveled. When questioned about the illegal substance use, Aaron admitted to using them, but claimed he had been forced by kidnappers. The officers were skeptical, so they continued their search, heading upstairs to the master bedroom. As they entered, the chemical smell grew stronger. The room appeared to have been recently cleaned, with spotless floors, except for a substance on the mattress. Just as they were about to leave, they noticed a small red blood spot on the bed. The officers returned downstairs to re-examine Aaron's account. He began to retell his story. The incident began at his residence around 3 a.m. where he and his girlfriend Denise were staying. A group of men wearing black aquatic gear stormed in, bursting into the house and shining a bright light directly into their eyes. Aaron couldn't determine the exact number of attackers, but they quickly restrained him and Denise with nylon cable ties. The assailants also made them wear swim goggles with an opaque coating, preventing them from seeing beyond the goggles. The attackers were equipped with laser targeting guns, electroshock weapons, and powerful flashlights. As they moved through the house, strong light and laser beams intertwined, causing him and Denise to not be able to see anything. Aaron and Denise were asked to wear headphones that played a strange, calming music. A voice then told them through the headphones that they were not in any danger and this was just a robbery. The voice reassured them that if they stayed calm, no harm would come to them. Believing the voice, Aaron and Denise remained silent and still. Later, Aaron's headphones were removed, and he was ordered to move to another room. In this new room, the thieves demanded that Aaron give them his bank account information and other financial details. Aaron quickly gave them the information, realizing that his money was likely gone for good. Aaron and Denise were taken back to the living room by the burglars. One of them checked their blood pressure and then forced them to drink a mixture from a mug that contained a sedative mixed with another substance. Before the sedative kicked in, Aaron heard the burglars' final orders. They had installed cameras to monitor the house. He was told not to contact the police and was threatened that if he did, they would take Denise as a hostage. The burglars promised to send further instructions later. Soon after, the sedative took effect, and Aaron passed out, unaware of what was happening around him. When Aaron regained consciousness, he found Denise missing. He struggled to break free and managed to untie his hands, then grabbed the phone to call for emergency help. The police found the story he told suspicious, so they came up with another theory, that Aaron might have been involved in Denise's disappearance. Or even worse, her death. The police thought he might have hidden her body and then thoroughly cleaned the house to remove any evidence. The strong smell of bleach and other cleaning products seemed to further support their guess as being correct. He then turned to alcohol, as evidenced by the empty bottles and his incoherent speech. To appear innocent, he possibly delayed reporting the incident and created a false story about strange abductors wearing water gear to cover his involvement. The police, however, were not convinced by his tale and considered it a diversion. They asked him to prepare to go to the station for questioning. Following a 17-hour interrogation, the police were unable to find any concrete evidence to support Aaron's claims that Denise was still missing, despite his continued insistence that she was. The Vallejo police immediately started a thorough search by using K-9 units, divers, and many volunteers. After talking to Denise's roommate, they discovered Denise and Aaron had recently broken up, which could be a motive. However, before suspecting Aaron, they needed to consider the possibility of a real kidnapping. The police carefully looked at every detail of Aaron's story, searching for any information about the alleged kidnappers, such as what they looked like and what they said. As the investigation continued, they see Aaron's story became increasingly unreasonable. According to Aaron, he to have given his banking information to the people who kidnapped him, but investigation found that his money was still there. Furthermore, just 2 hours before Aaron reporting the incident, he tried to withdraw a large amount of money from his account, saying he wanted to buy a boat. However, when questioned by detectives, Aaron said his kidnappers had actually demanded a ransom of $8,500. He couldn't convince the bank of this, so he made up the boat purchase story. The fact that the kidnappers had the temerity to capture him and Denise just for this money raised doubts about his story. During his interview, a detective noticed that Aaron's pupils were larger than usual, which could be a sign of drug use or a mental health condition, such as schizophrenia. It's also possible that his unusual story of being abducted by alien-like people could have been a hallucination. Due to the complexity of the case, the Vallejo police asked for assistance from the FBI. When the agents first arrived, they gave Aaron a polygraph test, which he failed. As a result, he became suspicious in the eyes of the investigators, so he quickly hired a lawyer to protect his rights. With the support of his legal team, Aaron let the police search his home, electronic devices, clothes, and even gave them a blood and fingerprint sample. The next day, the police organized a massive search in Vallejo, with over 100 teams participating. A police sonar detected an object in the bay that looked like a human body, but divers were unable to locate it. Meanwhile, Aaron has found a lawyer and is no longer in police custody. The search for Denise is intensified, with her picture being widely shared across various media platforms and displayed throughout the city. However, the detectives and FBI agents working on the case faced major obstacles. On the afternoon of March 24th, a journalist at the San Francisco Chronicle received a strange and unexpected email. The sender claimed to be the people who broke into Aaron's home, dressed in diving gear. The email stated that Denise was safe and included an audio recording of her summarizing recent news articles to prove this thing. This evidence initially alleviated concerns about her safety, showing that she was well up, at least until that morning. However, two aspects of this evidence raised suspicions. Firstly, Denise's message seemed unnaturally calm, similar to a news anchor reporting on a story. Secondly, the email was sent from an account belonging to Aaron, which led authorities to suspect that he and Denise might have been involved in staging the kidnapping. The police grew even more suspicious when Aaron presented his phone records, showing calls from the alleged kidnappers. However, these calls were made from an untraceable phone, which meant the caller's identity remained unknown. Investigators tracked down the location where this disposable phone was purchased, a store near Aaron's home. Surveillance footage from the store clearly showed an individual with a physical description matching Aaron's: tall, athletic build, and dark hair. This discovery further implicated Aaron in the suspected kidnapping plot. Denise. 2 days after vanishing, Denise resurfaced at her mother's home in Huntington Beach, California, approximately 400 miles from Vallejo, where she was supposedly abducted. As she recounted her ordeal, her story became even more extraordinary than Aaron's account. Denise insisted she was kidnapped by 4 men who kept her confined to a small space. They told her that their actions were following instructions from a client. Despite this, Denise stated that her captors treated her relatively well, providing her with basic necessities such as food and water, and allowing her to maintain her personal hygiene. Denise was initially cooperative with the police, but she became defensive and sought a lawyer when she sensed the officers didn't believe her. This left the investigators confused and skeptical of her story. They thought that Aaron and Denise might have made up the abduction story to get attention, become famous, or escape their problems for a while. The detectives were known to understand why 2 successful people from wealthy families would create such a complicated and fake story. The Vallejo police held a news conference to reassure everyone that there was no need to be concerned about recent assaults in the area. Despite not identifying a suspect or confirming that an abductor existed, they maintained that residents had nothing to worry about. The media remained highly interested in the case, drawing parallels to the movie Gone Girl, where the main character stages her own disappearance. Authorities expressed disappointment that Denise and Aaron had fabricated this story, wasting their time and resources. They asked Denise and Aaron to issue an official apology to the people of Vallejo. However, Denise and Aaron stuck to their story, insisting they were truthful. In the early hours of June 5, 2015, a crucial clue was found in the Denise case. A police officer in Alameda County, Northern California, report received to a reported burglary at a residence. The homeowner and his wife reported that an intruder broke in under the cover of darkness, attempting to restrain them. The homeowner fought off the attacker while his wife locked herself in the bathroom and called for help. The attacker fled the scene, but in his haste, he left behind his smartphone in the hallway. The police found that the phone was registered to an individual through a telecommunications provider. They tracked the registered address but found the property empty and the mailbox full of uncollected mail. 3 days later, the police used the discarded smartphone to track a lead 200 miles northeast of Vallejo to an isolated cabin near South Lake Tahoe, California. The officers cautiously entered the cabin, where they found a tall, athletic man with dark hair amidst the clutter of leftover food, trash, and piles of clothes. Initially, they overlooked the vehicle parked outside. However, upon further inspection, they discovered that the car had been reported stolen and contained several unusual items, including flashlights, a plastic gun with laser sights, a modified headset, and a black diving suit. A laptop belonging to Aaron was also found in the trunk. This clue led to the capture of one of the individuals responsible for the abduction of Denise. The man, who bore a striking resemblance to Aaron, but was not him, had no prior connection to Denise and Aaron. The abductor was identified as Matthew Muller, a 38-year-old disbarred attorney who had graduated from Harvard University and was a former Marine with a previously reputation in the legal community. Matthew began to engage in strange and unlawful behavior. The authorities connected him to a home invasion in Dublin and discovered he was also involved in Denise's abduction from Aaron's home. The unusual story Aaron and Denise told to law enforcement was mostly true. Their only mistake was thinking multiple people in diving gear had invaded. In reality, Matthew was the mastermind behind the crime and acted alone. It's likely that Aaron and Denise were confused and half asleep, which led them to believe it was more than one person involved in the incident. The intense light caused Denise and Aaron to believe there were multiple attackers. This illusion was furthered by a pre-recorded message that played through headphones, in which the attacker claimed to be a member of a professional debt recovery team. Matthew had also been linked to a 2009 home invasion in Palo Alto but managed to avoid consequences due to lack of evidence. Matthew, a highly intelligent and trained lawyer, had carefully crafted an elaborate and outlandish scheme, made authorities suspected Denise and Aaron of staging a hoax. Matthew's actions were carefully planned, reflecting his intelligence, even though he was having mental health problems, bipolar disorder, and psychosis, and he believed he also had Gulf War syndrome, which made it difficult for him to distinguish reality. One day, Matthew randomly met Aaron and Denise, and he became fixated on them. He used a drone to secretly watch Denise and Aaron's every move for 3 weeks before abducting them. Aaron did notice a bright light in the sky the night before the incident, which he thought might be a drone, but he couldn't imagine someone was actually spying on him. Matthew put his plan into action, breaking into Aaron's home at night, while wearing a diving suit. He used restraints on both Aaron and Denise, covering their eyes with goggles and playing a pre-recorded message through headphones to make them believe multiple people were involved. Matthew then separated them, keeping them in different rooms. He attacked Denise, taking advantage of her vulnerability, and locked her in the trunk of his car. He then drove her to a remote cabin in South Lake Tahoe, where he held her for 2 days, then letting her go near her parents' house. Matthew also stole Aaron's laptop, which he later used to send an email to a journalist at the San Francisco Chronicle using special software. After waking up the next day, Aaron faced the devastating truth that Denise's kidnapping was real. Desperate, Aaron contacted his bank to request a large sum of money, $88,500, to pay the ransom. Panicked and trying to protect Denise, he came up with a false reason, telling the bank he needed the money to buy a boat. Later, Aaron contacted Kaiser Hospital and left a message for Denise's supervisor, informing them that she would be absent from work, as instructed by Matthew. The investigation uncovered a disturbing video recorded by Matthew, showing him physically abuse Denise. After seeing the evidence, the Vallejo police apologized Denise and Aaron because at first thought they had made up the story of being kidnapped. Denise and Aaron decided to sue the city of Vallejo, citing the mistreatment they received during the investigation. The lawsuit ultimately resulted in a $2.5 million settlement, acknowledging the mistakes made in handling the case. Matthew Muller was found guilty of kidnapping charges and received a 40-year prison sentence in 2017. During his trial, Matthew expressed remorse for his actions and the pain he caused. After the kidnapping, the victim, Denise, faced skepticism and was even accused of making it up. Ironically, Matthew the crime came forward to defend her. He sent 2 anonymous letters to the media, claiming that the kidnapping had indeed taken place. Denise also experienced relentless nightmares and struggled to overcome the trauma. She waited until Matthew's conviction in 2017 to openly discuss the incident. Denise reported she being held by multiple men, which Matthew confirmed by admitting he had accomplices, although he refused to reveal their identities. Aaron and Denise grew closer, got married, had a child. Then they wrote a book together called Victory F that told the story of their experience. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Bonnie Craig. Bonnie Craig was born in Calgary, Canada, on March 30, 1976. Her biological father played a small role in her upbringing, as Bonnie and her older brother Jason were lovingly raised by their stepfather, Gary Campbell. Gary treated Bonnie and Jason as his own children. When Bonnie was 5 years old, Gary and her mother Karen had a son named Adam. 2 years later, a younger sister named Samantha was born and she quickly became Bonnie's close companion. Bonnie loved to dress Samantha in fairy tale costumes and teach her everything Bonnie had learned. Gary, the head of the family, worked in the oil industry, which required him to move frequently to different locations. As a result, Bonnie was used to changing schools, having attended 6 elementary schools and 2 high schools, which taught her to adapt to new environments and make friends easily. During her childhood, Bonnie lived in a variety of climates. From sunny California with its outdoor pool to snowy Anchorage, West Texas, and finally back to the beautiful landscapes of Alaska. However, Karen and Gary's sudden divorce marked a significant change for the children. Samantha and Adam began alternating between their parents' homes. Bonnie focused on her studies and various extracurricular activities, including swimming, diving, horseback riding, writing poetry, and playing the violin and viola in the school orchestra. However, life continued to present her with unforeseen challenges. While she was trying to come to terms with her parents' divorce, tragedy struck when her best friend died in a drunk driving accident, a tragedy that profoundly changed Bonnie's outlook on life. She pledged to abstain from drinking and driving, and she was so concerned about the risks of driving that she decided not to get a driver's license for fear of getting into an accident. Instead, she chose to walk or take public transportation. To raise awareness about the dangers of drunk driving. After graduating from high school, Bonnie moved to Anchorage to study psychology at the University of Alaska. At the same time, her boyfriend, Cameron Miyazaki, was studying architecture at the University of California at Berkeley. Despite the physical distance, they kept in touch by phone and exchanged emails regularly. Bonnie's home life became crowded as her mother began a new relationship with Jim Foster, who brought her 3 children with him. In search of more independence, Bonnie decided to move in with her stepfather. The move was strategic, as it put her only a 15-minute drive from college. Keeping her vow, she took public transportation to class 3 times a week, enjoying brisk walks to the bus stop under the clear blue Alaskan sky. She also balanced her studies with a part-time job at Sam's Club. Her life was filled with purpose, ideals, and passion. On the morning of September 28, 1994, Bonnie left her stepfather's house and headed to the bus stop to attend college classes. That day, a student at the University of Anchorage was taking scenic photos on a hiking trail in Chugach State Park, about 15 miles from Bonnie's house. The park was especially beautiful at this time of year, due to Alaska's mild temperatures, long daylight hours, and beautiful scenery. As the student adjusted her camera lens, she noticed something unusual in the water near the cliff's edge, a striking blue object. Upon closer inspection, she discovered a heartbreaking sight, a woman floating face down in shallow water. She immediately called the police to report the incident. The McHugh Creek section is difficult to access except from the cliff top or along the stream for miles, suggesting a tragic accident. Initially, police believed the victim may have slipped and fallen from the cliff top, resulting in her death. This accidental theory was the first conclusion investigators reached. It is believed that the victim, attracted by the peaceful atmosphere of the park, may have lost her balance and fallen tragically. The body was then transferred to the medical examiner's office, where an autopsy was performed to determine the cause of injuries and assist in identifying the victim. The autopsy revealed that the young woman died from drowning and severe head trauma, likely caused by a fall from the cliff. A unique class ring, often worn by graduating students, helped police identify the victim as Bonnie Craig. To confirm their findings, police contacted Bonnie's family. Karen, Bonnie's mother, is on a short trip to a coastal town to attend a relative's wedding with her husband, Jim, who spent his childhood there. The trip is significant because Karen will meet Jim's parents for the first time. Karen is having a wonderful time with her future in-laws, laughing and sharing stories. But she has no idea that tragedy has struck her beloved daughter, Bonnie. A knock on the cruise ship's door at 3 a.m. shatters the peaceful atmosphere. When faced with the heartbreaking news, Karen initially refuses to believe it, thinking it's a cruel joke. It's unthinkable that her responsible daughter would be alone in the park instead of attending college classes. The news of Bonnie's death from the police has left Karen devastated. Karen has spent the past 3 years working undercover for the Anchorage Police Department. After graduating from the police academy, she specialized in drug trafficking cases. Her colleagues deeply respected her problem-solving skills, which she had developed over years of dedication to her job. However, Karen's dedication extended beyond her work to her family. Her undercover work often required a difficult balance between her two roles. Karen instinctively questioned the initial ruling that Bonnie's death was an accident, and her priority was to turn the investigation over to her own department. Believing that there was more to her daughter's tragic death, she asked the police for detailed information about the circumstances surrounding the incident, including whether Bonnie had shown any signs of sexual violence. However, the police noted that Bonnie had been found fully clothed. Karen knew that a more thorough investigation was needed. Her daughter, Bonnie, was responsible and trustworthy, always kept her promises, and she didn't even have a driver's license, so it was difficult to understand why she was alone and miles away from home during school hours. What further confused Karen was that Bonnie's personal belongings were not at the scene, which made her suspect that the police force might be inclined to rush to classify the incident as an unfortunate accident. Karen was determined to continue her search for the truth. Karen returned to Alaska on the earliest flight possible to formally identify the body, holding out hope that the deceased might not be her daughter, Bonnie. Entering the morgue, she hesitantly approached the ambulance where the body was covered with a white sheet. When she pulled the sheet away and saw the face, her worst fears came true. It was indeed her daughter, Bonnie, resting in eternal peace. Karen's instincts, as a grieving mother and a law enforcement officer, told her that her daughter's death was more than just an accident. As she held her daughter's hand, she saw bruises and swelling on her knuckles, which she assumed were defensive wounds. Karen wanted the police to record this evidence, believing it could be crucial in finding clues before her daughter was buried. The police were skeptical, thinking the injuries could have been caused by a fall. Despite the police's skepticism, Karen decided to take a different approach in her quest for justice. Karen reached out to her media contacts. The shocking news of a young college student's death in a creek quickly garnered widespread attention from the local media. Karen attempted to contact her superiors, hoping for assistance as precious time was running out, but was told the matter was beyond their scope. The next day, Karen, Jim, Gary, Jason, Adam, and Samantha gathered at the funeral home to say their final goodbyes to Bonnie. It was difficult for her siblings to see her lying motionless, knowing how full of life she had once been. As they prepared for the funeral, they had to choose a casket. Karen, wanting to keep any potential evidence safe, decided on a stone crypt, thinking that it might need to be reopened in the future if new information came to light. Although she tried to seek help and attention from the media, her efforts seemed to complicate things rather than help uncover the truth. Karen was summoned to the police station and asked not to publicly call the incident a crime so as not to affect the ongoing investigation. The police were carefully reviewing all possible leads and were considering Gary Campbell, Bonnie's stepfather, as a potential suspect. They suspect him because his alibi doesn't quite add up and there are reports of conflict between him and Bonnie. This information leaves Karen stunned, as she finds it hard to believe that Gary, who has always been Bonnie's loving father, could be involved in such a terrible thing. The situation worsens when Karen goes to Gary's house to collect her daughter's belongings, but finds Bonnie's room locked. An argument breaks out when Gary accuses Karen of stealing a photo of Bonnie that she took without his permission. He insists on keeping the memories of the girl he cherishes. Bonnie's death has a profound effect on her younger sister Samantha, who was only 12 when the tragedy occurred. Samantha begins to struggle in school and finds it difficult to concentrate at home. She often shares everything with Bonnie and feels completely lost without her guidance. The confusion that arose from her sister's death even caused her to doubt her own trust in her father, leaving her uncertain about what was right. One evening, as her father, Gary, was tucking her in for bed, fear filled her eyes as she asked if he was responsible for Bonnie's death. Gary was surprised and hurt by her question. He regained his composure and gently reassured Samantha that he would never hurt her sister. His comforting words helped her to ease her fears and trust him again. After Bonnie's death, the police spoke to Adam and Samantha, both of whom confirmed that their father, Gary, had been home the day Bonnie died, only leaving for work after Bonnie had left the house. His alibi was confirmed by co-workers and supervisors, clearing any doubts about him. An autopsy revealed that Bonnie had died several hours before her body was found. The cause of death was determined to be drowning, and she also suffered severe head injuries that may have been caused by falling from a cliff or being struck by a heavy object. The police began a thorough investigation into Bonnie's death, which was initially ruled an accident at the park. A police officer carefully searched the area near the cliff and found a leaf with a drop of Bonnie's blood a few feet from the edge of the cliff. This prompted an investigation into the presence of blood. If her injuries were caused by a fall, the discovery led the police to consider that Bonnie's fall may not have been an accident, but rather the result of someone else's actions. The police were aware that solving this case would be difficult and would require them to proceed with caution. Therefore, they chose not to notify the relevant parties at this time. Family members suspected that a crime had occurred and the police deliberately withheld all information about the case, to avoid alerting potential perpetrators. They could not escape the feeling that the killer could be someone close to Bonnie. This made Karen's sudden media release a hindrance to the investigation. Bonnie Craig's funeral was filled with loved ones, including friends, family, and acquaintances, as well as her boyfriend, who traveled from California to say goodbye. He was deeply saddened, as he could never have imagined such a tragic ending to their story. Even Bonnie's biological father, Gordon Craig, who had not played an active role in her life, attended the funeral to pay his respects and say goodbye to her. The funeral took place at a church that Bonnie occasionally visited. It was a moment for everyone who knew Bonnie to pay their last respects, share fond memories of her, and support each other during this difficult time. A week after Bonnie's death, Karen decided to investigate her daughter's case herself, since the police had not provided any updates. Karen carefully traced Bonnie's pre-dawn route from Gary's house to try to understand what might have been going through her daughter's mind that morning. She wanted to put herself in Bonnie's shoes and imagine what details might have caught her attention. As Karen walked along the path her daughter had walked many times that week, she began to realize how dangerous it was. The path was surrounded by tall trees that seemed to loom in the shadows, hiding potential dangers. Karen wondered why Bonnie didn't ask her stepfather to drive her to the bus stop, and why she never mentioned the dangerous path she had walked every day. She later learned that Bonnie felt the same way, not wanting to worry anyone and wanting to be independent. Bonnie was prepared and carried pepper spray, believing that she could protect herself if necessary. Karen had also taught Bonnie from a young age never to hitchhike with strangers, believing that her daughter would only hitchhike with someone she knew and trusted. When the walk yielded no clues, Karen drove around the area, looking for any of Bonnie's belongings that might provide clues to the investigation. Unfortunately, she found nothing. In January 1995, Karen contacted the sergeant in charge of Bonnie's case directly to ask if her daughter had been sexually assaulted. The sergeant was forced to tell her the truth. Karen was allowed to see the results of Bonnie's autopsy, on the condition that they remain strictly confidential. The autopsy revealed that Bonnie's body was fully clothed, but she had injuries to her genitals and male DNA was recovered from a swab. This information must be kept confidential because the source of the DNA is still unknown. During the investigation, all the men associated with Bonnie were questioned and their DNA samples were collected. However, no matches were found at that time. Although several witnesses saw Bonnie walking to the bus stop that morning, none of them saw her actually get on the bus. The question of how Bonnie ended up in Chugash Park, more than 10 miles from her home, remains unanswered. Investigators speculate that she may have been attacked while walking alone in the dark. A few months after Bonnie's death, Jim's family invited Jim and Karen on a week-long cruise, hoping that a change of scenery would help them heal. Karen was hesitant at first, as the cruise reminded her of her daughter's tragic death. However, she realized that the trip could be a chance to temporarily escape her grief. For the past year, Karen had been consumed by grief, the investigation, and waiting for news of her daughter. She saw the trip as a chance to temporarily escape her worries. Karen, Jim, Jim's brother Ken, and Ken's wife spent the week enjoying the sights and sounds of the ocean. When they returned to the dock, they received word from the Coast Guard that their family had attempted to contact them about an emergency. Karen immediately became concerned that it might be about one of her children. However, this time the bad news was about Jim and Ken's father, who had suddenly died of a heart attack. The news was especially shocking because the family had just celebrated their father's 63rd birthday, when he had seemed healthy and happy. Unfortunately, this was the second time the family had received heartbreaking news after returning from a boat trip. Karen's remaining children had a hard time coping with the loss of their sister Bonnie and the impact of their mother's relentless pursuit of justice. As the investigation into Bonnie's death became the focus, the children often felt neglected and deprived of the care they needed. Karen struggled with the moral dilemma of balancing her love for her children with her commitment to seeking justice for Bonnie's death, despite the possibility that the case would never be solved. Over time, Karen's children grew up and started families of their own, bringing her immense joy as a grandmother. Amidst these life changes, her youngest son Adam underwent a cornea transplant to improve his increasingly poor eyesight, which unfortunately resulted in blindness in one eye. Karen's personal life went through many changes. She married Jim, but unfortunately their marriage ended in divorce after 3 years. The family faced more difficult times, including the loss of Karen's brother and mother, who battled cancer. Throughout the ups and downs, the sadness and grief of losing Bonnie continued to have a lasting impact on Karen's life. The family experienced a great deal of emotional pain, including sleepless nights, anxiety, anger, and deep depression. On January 5, 2007, 12 years after Bonnie's death, Karen set off on a round-the-world trip with a friend. While staying on an island in the Philippines, Karen received an unexpected email from an unknown sender with the subject line, "Bonnie." The sudden message made her heart pound, as the case, which had been unsolved for years, had recently gained new momentum. A new team of investigators, using an advanced database, retested the DNA evidence found on Bonnie. Their efforts led to a breakthrough. They matched the DNA to a man serving a sentence in New Hampshire for a series of armed robberies. Kenneth Dion was born in 1969. He was 25 years old when Bonnie died. He only became a suspect in the case after his DNA was added to the system in late 2006. With a martial arts background and a track record of competition, Kenneth served in the United States Army. However, his time in the U.S. Army was cut short due to his drug use. Kenneth had a particular habit of carrying unusual items in his car, including a 3-pronged stick and nunchucks. Kenneth Dion had only recently been released from prison after a brief period of freedom in May 2007. Kenneth was charged with assault and murder in connection with Bonnie's death. According to the indictment, Kenneth attacked Bonnie as she walked to the bus stop, using weapons and martial arts to sexually assault her. And then, to conceal evidence of his crimes, he dumped her body off a cliff in the park. As more information became available about Kenneth, it was discovered that he had a lengthy criminal record, with 18 convictions, including 10 misdemeanors and 8 felonies. Had Kenneth's DNA been in the database sooner, the case might have been solved more quickly. Kenneth Dion was sentenced to 124 years in prison on October 31, 2011, 17 years after the incident. He received 99 years for murder and 25 years for assault. He is eligible for parole at age 80. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Melissa Caddick. Melissa Louise was born on April 21, 1971, to Barbara and Ted Grimley. Her father working for an insurance company and her mother working as a physiotherapist. Melissa's family was middle class and her parents were active in the Lions Club. Melissa was a quiet child who had difficulty studying but later developed an interest in fashion at an early age. After completing high school, she went on to study secretarial and business studies at Patrick's College in Sydney. Melissa initially worked as an administrator in the investment sector of the National Road Association. She had always been interested in finance. In 1992, after a stressful week, Melissa went out to unwind and have a drink. She ended up meeting a charming man at the bar, and they struck up a conversation. However, it became apparent that the man had ill intentions. He maxed out Melissa's credit cards and stole several valuable items from her home. When Melissa finally realized what had happened, she lost all her money. This experience taught her a big lesson. Sharing financial information and putting trust in wrong people can have serious consequences. Unfortunately, Melissa would later apply this lesson to exploit others rather than protect them. In 1998, Melissa accepted an office administrator position at an investment bank's Sydney branch. Her responsibilities included managing large sums of money. Although Melissa had previously experienced the bitterness of being cheated out of money by her ex-boyfriend, but she proved that she was no different from him. 6 months into her role, it was discovered that Melissa had falsified the manager's signature to embezzle $22,000 from the company. When the corporate headquarters became aware of her misconduct, she was allowed to resign voluntarily to avoid police involvement. Furthermore, they did not ask Melissa to return the money she had embezzled, as they considered the amount too small to make a big deal out of it. After a rough breakup with her ex-boyfriend, Melissa decides to focus on rebuilding her personal life. In April 2000, she married a British man named Tony Caddick. Melissa also takes time to lose weight and stay in shape, and she hired a personal trainer to teach her. And he introduced her to various clients, was a financial advisor who managed a currency and finance firm. He was looking for a new office manager, and Melissa saw an opportunity to excel. As their friendship grew, he offered her the role, and Melissa quickly proved herself in her new position. She was diligent and careful, making informed decisions about which risks to take and which to avoid. By 2002, Melissa had sufficient funds to invest $750,000 in the firm, gaining 25% ownership. Her success led to her being featured on the cover of Independent Financial Advisor magazine. Melissa warned investors in the magazine to be cautious of scams and financial pyramids. She advised them to thoroughly check the qualifications and ethics of their financial advisors before making any decisions. However, a year later, Melissa experienced a change of heart and sought to expand her own investments into real estate and the stock market. Melissa's employer had strict policies and refused to support her ambitions, leading to a significant disagreement. As a result, she left the company in 2004, regaining her $750,000 investment. This sudden change prompted Melissa and her husband, Tony, to move to England, a place he was familiar with before their move to Australia. By the summer of 2006, Melissa and Tony had established a comfortable lifestyle in Essex, a picturesque area northeast of London, thanks to Melissa's previous financial success. During this time, Tony qualified as a lawyer, landed a high-profile job. Then they welcomed the birth of their son, marking a joyful milestone in their life together. Melissa struggled with feelings of emptiness, despite significant life changes, such as having children and moving to a new country. With Tony often traveling long hours between Essex and London for work, Melissa often felt lonely at home. Rather than finding a job to fill the void, instead, she became distracted and eventually began an affair with a charming and attractive man named Anthony Khalidi, who happened to be her hairdresser from Sydney. Tony eventually discovered her infidelity a few months later. Melissa secretly spent large sums of money on trips to European cities with her lover, pretending to attend financial conferences to keep up with the latest industry developments. When her husband, Tony, discovered this and confronted her, Melissa became angry and blamed him for her actions, saying he was the reason she had an affair. The argument became so heated that Tony left their home to stay with his parents, temporarily removing himself from Melissa to reduce tension. When he returned a few days later, he found that Melissa had taken their child, most of their possessions, and all their shared savings, selling their furniture and clothes before fleeing to her hometown in Sydney with their son. Upon returning to Australia, Melissa smeared her husband's reputation to everyone, falsely portraying him as the one who cheated, lied, was conservative, and a neglectful father, despite having no solid evidence. She quickly reunited with her new partner, Anthony, after her return to Australia in January 2012. Melissa also took control of their property in England and sold it for a significant $1.3 million. Melissa spent the funds on a life of luxury, moving into a large home with 5 bedrooms and 5 bathrooms in Rose Bay. This is where she began operating a financial pyramid scheme. Throughout her life, Melissa had ambitions of achieving wealth. However, her financial transactions frequently resulted in unfavorable outcomes. Melissa's ex-boyfriend's deception gave her experience, which was to teach her the importance of gaining people's trust in order to manipulate their money. She applied this lesson to her own deceitful practices, including forging signatures on checks, ultimately leaving her husband financially ruined. Melissa was ruthless in using others to get rich. She quickly became bored with her routine and thought about how to achieve her goals. A big plan started to form in her mind. This idea wasn't new to her. She had thought about it for a long time but hadn't acted on it until now. By this point, Melissa had already made a lot of money, but she wasn't satisfied and didn't want to stop. She thought it was too easy to just make money from a few people. Instead, Melissa designed a clever strategy to appeal to a large group of people to join and increase her wealth. In 2012, Melissa began her complex scam by presenting herself as a financial advisor to her friends, family, and acquaintances. She misled her investors by promising unusually high returns on their investments, despite she not having the qualifications or expertise. Once she received their money, Melissa created fake trading account screenshots and sent fabricated monthly reports showing gains of 10, 20, or 30% via email. Melissa's fake successes improved investors' confidence in her. As a result, they invested more money or recommended her to others. Her bank account quickly grew from thousands to millions as she tricked many people, including friends, former co-workers, her personal trainer, relatives, and even her own parents, into giving her their money. With the ill-gotten money she had earned, Melissa's spending became extremely lavish and wasteful. She bought luxury cars, expensive clothing, art, and jewelry, creating a false image of wealth. All of these are from people who have been fooled by her, who had no idea they were financing her lavish lifestyle. Some of her excessive purchases include over $48,000 spent on Chanel products, $275,000 on international travel, $229,000 at Dior, and more than $25,000 on protein shakes. Melissa tried to make her business seem exclusive by telling investors that it was no longer accepting new clients. However, she would later offer them a spot if they invested quickly, making it seem like they were getting a rare opportunity. By 2014, Melissa's wealth allowed her to buy a luxurious $6 million mansion on Orlando Road. The mansion had stunning views of the Sydney Harbour Bridge and featured spacious living areas, a swimming pool, and a large dining room with a panoramic view of the city. In 2016, Melissa gave her husband Anthony a $390,000 Audi R8 as a gift. The car's license plate was customized to represent his music label. Anthony was a musician and part-time DJ. Additionally, Melissa herself owns several expensive cars. Melissa has taken 25 international trips since 2009, visiting places like the ski resorts of Aspen and secluded islands in the South Pacific. However, Melissa's financial situation is complex. Melissa's parents sold the family home in southern Sydney and gave her the money to buy a penthouse in Edgecliff, but on the condition that they could live there for life. However, the penthouse was not jointly owned, and was in Melissa's name only. Instead of using the funds to cover the penthouse expenses, she diverted the money for personal spending. One such purchase was a $590,000 diamond. Melissa made her fortune dishonestly and spent millions each year indulging in her extravagant lifestyle. She treated herself to stays at luxury resorts, traveled by private jet, and spared no expense in acquiring whatever she desired. For 8 years, Melissa's complex financial scam went no have difficulty. She ran a Ponzi scheme, using money from new investors to pay returns to those who invested earlier. Her deceitful actions ultimately earned her around 30 million Australian dollars. Melissa was aware that her actions couldn't last forever, but she chose to ignore this reality. Her fraudulent plan started to unravel in 2019 when the Australian Securities and Investments Commission, ASIC, received a tip that Melissa was working as a financial advisor without the required license. Initially, she was not investigated, but by June 2020, the situation had attracted the attention of investigators. Their investigation found that Melissa did not hold a valid Australian financial services license and had been improperly using a former colleague's credentials, having forged documents by adding her own name to them. The information led to serious concerns for the Commission, especially since Melissa had by then dishonestly taken around 30 million Australian dollars from her clients. To investigate further, authorities closely monitored Melissa's activities for several months, carefully recording each transaction. Their thorough investigation eventually found solid evidence of her deceitful actions on November 10, 2020. This prompted the regulatory body to take swift action by freezing Melissa's assets and taking her passport. The next day, a search was conducted at Melissa's luxurious home, valued at over $6 million. When Melissa seemed extremely nervous, showing that she was well aware of the trouble she was in. Her lavish lifestyle is under threat because of serious charges, and she risks a lengthy prison sentence. After her assets were frozen and searched, Melissa disappeared without a trace early the next morning. On the morning of November 12, 2020, Melissa woke up before dawn, dressed in her running clothes, and left the bedroom without disturbing Anthony, who was still asleep. She put on her sneakers and headed to the front door. The soft sound of the door closing was heard by her 14-year-old son, marking the last time she was seen. Melissa went missing, and 30 hours later, Anthony reported her disappearance to the authorities at 11:30 a.m. The news of her disappearance led detectives to launch a thorough investigation. They were suspicious of her disappearance, especially considering her recently uncovered involvement in fraudulent schemes. Authorities from the Australian Securities and Investments Commission, ASIC, were already investigating her for financial deception, and her sudden disappearance fueled their suspicions. As the days passed, family members grew increasingly worried. 1 week went by without any leads or word of her whereabouts, leaving her family in great distress and them to make public appeals, begging her to come forward or at least let them know she was safe. Melissa's actions had severe consequences, as she was accused of defrauding millions of dollars from influential individuals, including her friends and family. The investors she deceived were aware of how extravagantly she had spent their money. Since they knew where she lived, her disappearance created a puzzling mystery. People speculated that Melissa may have escaped to avoid arrest, or that one of the many investors she had defrauded, feeling angry and deceived, kidnapped her in revenge. Investigators began by analyzing Melissa's phone records and found no activity after she disappeared. They also discovered that she had left her essential belongings, including her phone and keys, at her home. Furthermore, her bank transactions stopped, prompting the officers to review local security footage from the day she vanished. However, they couldn't find Melissa in the footage, suggesting that she may have left the area in a private vehicle or been accompanied by someone. Another possibility was that Melissa stayed close by but remained hidden. But this theory was considered unlikely. As the search for Melissa continued, some people began to worry that she might have ended her own life by jumping off the cliffs near her home. However, her loved ones, including Anthony, refused to accept this theory. They believed that Melissa would never leave her young son behind, even if she was facing serious charges that might result in a relatively long prison sentence or a large fine. The authorities expanded their search to the entire Australian territory, after seizing Melissa's travel documents and thereby preventing her from leaving the country legally. Melissa's sudden disappearance drew extensive media coverage in Australia and internationally. There were reported sightings in Brisbane, Melbourne, and Darwin. As her identity became known to millions, making it difficult for her to escape. Authorities expected that, given her circumstances, Melissa would eventually surrender herself. The case remained unresolved for 101 days. Until a disturbing clue was found on the shore. On February 21, 2021, two people collecting litter on Bunda Beach in New South Wales noticed a grey sneaker from a distance. As they got closer, they found that the sneaker was still attached to a decomposed and discolored human foot, which was emitting a strong, foul smell. The sneaker had washed up on the beach just hours before it was discovered. Notably, the foot inside the sneaker matched the size and characteristics of Melissa's shoes. Forensic experts began verifying the identity through DNA analysis, while oceanographic scientists studied the Tasman Sea's coastal currents to determine how the foot ended up on Bunda Beach, over 250 miles from the Melissa household. 1 week after the discovery of Melissa's remains, DNA testing confirmed a match with a sample from Melissa's toothbrush, and family members identified the sneaker found at the scene as hers. However, despite this evidence, there was still uncertainty about Melissa's fate, with many people speculating that she might be alive. They believed this was possible because Melissa was suspected of collaborating with her spouse and others to swindle investors out of their savings, and they claimed she was not the type of person to harm herself. This led to suspicions that Melissa may have had help faking her own disappearance to avoid punishment, or that someone else was involved in her vanishing. Melissa's life was rapidly falling apart. Being caught would mean losing everything that mattered to her: her wealth, freedom, friendships, and her family. It's hard to imagine what she was thinking on that critical morning. However, experts were puzzled by the discovery of Melissa's badly decomposed foot, fueling speculation about the authenticity of the scene. Interestingly, Melissa had a connection to the beach, where she had spent many summer vacations as a child. This led some to suspect that she might have cut off her own foot and left it there as a red herring to mislead investigators. A theory that has sparked intense debate. Anthony claimed he was unaware his wife's financial activities were deceitful because he really thought their lavish lifestyle was from the legitimate money they earned. There were rumors that Melissa had borrowed money to invest in cryptocurrency with the intention of repaying her investors and then disappearing. She allegedly planned ways to avoid being detected. Since no new information or evidence came to light, Melissa Caddick was officially declared dead, and the process of dividing her property began. Anthony was dismayed to find that his $390,000 vehicle, along with other assets, was sold at an auction to partially compensate some of the investors who had been affected. The Dew Heights mansion was still legally owned by Melissa. Anthony claimed he needed money to care for Melissa's child because he had very little funds in his bank account, only $19.95. In May 2022, a federal court ordered Anthony to leave the mansion, and by October, the property was put up for sale. Later, Melissa's collection of luxury items, including designer clothes, art, jewelry, and other high-end goods, was sold. The sale proceeds are used to partially repay investors who lost money. Some had invested their entire retirement savings, while others had sold their businesses, hoping to achieve the wealth Melissa had promised. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Hannah Anderson. The Anderson family was a classic American household. Parents Christina and Brett worked hard to give their children, Ethan and Hannah, a comfortable life. Ethan enjoyed activities like fishing and racing video games with his friends, while Hannah, 16 years old, was into dancing, social media, and cheerleading. Like many teenagers, Hannah was carefree and unaware of the world's dangers, never imagining that harm could come to her or her family. However, their lives are about to face a tragic incident, as a sinister person was secretly watching them, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Christina had a short marriage before meeting Brett. After her first marriage ended, she was lively and energetic, enjoying dance and fitness. She loved trying new things and was looking for someone special to share her adventures with. Brett was smart, hardworking, friendly, and kind, and the two quickly connected. Their friendship soon turned into romance. At the time they got married, Brett worked in the telecommunications industry. By the fall of 1996, Christina was pregnant with their first child. As the due date approached, the Andersons' three-bedroom townhouse was filled with anticipation and excitement from family and friends. On July 22, 1997, Hannah Anderson was born, instantly charming everyone with her bright blue eyes and light-colored hair. Her birth was a joyful occasion for the Andersons and their loved ones, marking an important milestone. Brett and Christina, known for hosting gatherings and barbecues, had created a close-knit group of friends and family. Brett's best friend, James Lee DiMaggio, was a significant part of the family, sharing many outdoor adventures with Brett. At first, Hannah would join her dad and Uncle James, but as she grew older, she started spending more time with her mother and friends. Ethan, on the other hand, enjoyed accompanying his dad and Uncle James on these adventures. Born on October 8, 2004, Ethan was a brave boy who loved learning about sports and fishing from his dad. During a difficult divorce, James found comfort and support in the kindness of the Andersons, who were always willing to help those in need. In 2009, he acquired a property in the Mountain Empire area of San Diego, California, about an hour from where the Anderson family lived. This is a picturesque two-story log cabin with a private three-car garage. The area was rural, with fewer than 400 residents, making it perfect for a hunting getaway. Once James had fully furnished and decorated the cabin, he invited Brett, Christina, and their children to use it as a vacation home whenever they liked. Brett was devoted to his job, often working long hours to support his family, which kept him away from home often. Similarly, Christina was busy with her job and taking care of their children, leaving little free time for other things. Meanwhile, their teenage daughter Hannah was going through a phase where she desired more independence and spent most of her time on her phone, deeply engaged in social media. Despite Brett's hectic schedule, he always made time to keep a close eye on Hannah, ensuring she avoided negative influences and stayed within his safe boundaries. Hannah's best friend was Marissa Chavez. They had a lot in common and were almost inseparable, enjoying activities like dance, cheerleading, hairstyling, fashion, makeup, and talking about boys. They loved being the center of attention. Hannah was a smart, adventurous, happy, and outgoing person who lived life without worrying. Her parents, Brett and Christina, supported her as she became more independent and pursued her interests. Hannah spent her time coaching young cheerleaders and spending quality time with her younger brother, Ethan. In 2013, Hannah was in her second year of high school in Lakeside, while her brother Ethan was attending Linda Lake Elementary School. During this time, Brett was having trouble at work and started looking for a new job. In April, he received a promising job offer. But it required him to be away from home for extended periods. After discussing this opportunity with Christina, they decided it was the best choice for the family. Brett moved to Tennessee, but promised to return home to celebrate Hannah's 16th birthday, an event he was determined not to miss. When Brett was away, Christina relied more heavily on their network of friends and family for support. Despite his own financial struggles and the possibility of losing his home, James offered to help. He even considered the possibility of moving to Texas as a solution. Brett's absence did not reduce James's involvement with the Anderson family. James often drove Hannah and Ethan to their activities and kept them entertained, essentially becoming a second father figure to them. James also welcomed Hannah and her friends into his home, providing a space for them to hang out without their parents around. James set clear rules to create a safe environment for the teenagers while Brett was away. No boys were allowed in the house. And his bedroom was off limits. Despite this, he allowed for some minor rules to be bent. Meanwhile, in Tennessee, Brett deeply missed his family and made it to call them every other day to check in on their well-being. He also remained in close contact with James, updating him on his new work challenges and relying on him to keep Christina and their children safe and supported. Christina would drop off Hannah at the cheerleading gym in the morning, where Hannah mentored younger cheerleaders. After the coaching session ended at 4 p.m., Hannah would wait outside for Christina to pick her up and take her home. Hannah was looking forward to seeing Marissa at home, who was eagerly waiting to hear from her, but unfortunately, Marissa never received a message from Hannah. At approximately 8 p.m. on a Sunday, a resident from the Mountain Empire community called the San Diego County Sheriff's Office to report a house fire. The fire had spread to both the main house and a nearby smaller structure. Despite the best efforts of the firefighting team, the flames initially difficult to control. The fire was particularly notable in the small town for its severity. The upper floor of the house had collapsed, and a gray SUV was found parked nearby. It took nearly 2 hours for the firefighters to extinguish the flames, even though the fire station was only a 3-minute drive away. Once the fire was brought under control, the firefighters conducted a thorough interior search to check if anyone was inside. While inspecting the smaller adjacent building, a firefighter noticed a strip of green tarp. Upon closer inspection, 2 legs were found protruding from the entrance of the detached garage. A body was found under a tarp, face down, with the upper part merged into the tarp, making it difficult to identify the sex at first. However, the clothing and hair suggested it was a woman. The fire had burned the area, melting the tarp to her hair, skin, and skull. There was a large amount of blood on the floor beneath the body, indicating a struggle before the fire. She had been restrained, with rope tied around her, duct tape wrapped multiple times around her mouth and neck, and her ankles bound by white plastic rope. A small brown dog was found hiding under a sleeping bag next to the woman's body. The license plate from the burned-out SUV was identified as belonging to Christina Anderson, leading to the assumption that her remains had been discovered. The medical examiner's examination revealed that Christina had suffered a severe throat injury. When the body was turned over, Brett was overcome with grief, still reeling from the news he had just received from the police, that his wife had been found dead in a violent manner. The shock was overwhelming as Brett struggled to comprehend how something so horrific could have happened to Christina, in their own garage, with no sign of their children or James. Brett felt a sense of helplessness, haunted by the fact that he was not there to protect his family when they needed him most. The discovery that their family dog, C, was also involved made the situation even more unbearable, leaving Brett to wonder how such cruelty could be inflicted on the ones he loved. When the investigation began, detectives have discovered that Christina Anderson, a 42-year-old woman, was the victim. Her two children, 16-year-old Hannah and 8-year-old Ethan, have all gone missing. The crime scene was at the home of James Lee DiMaggio, a close friend of the family and the owner of the house. James, 40, was also missing, along with his blue Nissan car with California license plates. As the investigation unfolded, this information caught the attention of Brett, a friend of James's. Although he didn't want to suspect his best friend, but Christina's body was discovered in James's garage, and his children, along with James, were missing, he felt compelled to act. Brett promptly boarded a flight to San Diego, ready to face the disturbing possibility that his friend might be involved. The police searched the area around James's home, talking to neighbors, and they said that saw Christina, Ethan, and the family dog going into the house the night before. This was the same night James had a party to say goodbye before his move to Texas. In California, an Amber Alert was issued, which is a national system used to quickly tell people about child abductions. News of the alert quickly spread through social media, and people in the community immediately started helping. Marissa, who was one of Hannah's closest friends, and some of their classmates, took charge of handing out flyers in the area. During a thorough investigation of James's burned-down home, fire investigators made a disturbing discovery: the severely burned body of another victim, believed to be Ethan, a child. Brett was in shock upon hearing the news, and it took time for him to come to terms with it. However, as the harsh reality of never being able to see his son again sank in, it ultimately became too overwhelming for him, and he breaking down. His only comfort was the hope that Hannah might still be alive. Having already lost his wife, son, and pet, the thought of losing his daughter too was too much to bear. If James had indeed kidnapped Hannah after what he did to Christina and Ethan, she was in extreme danger. Detectives tried to determine the whereabouts of Hannah and James by questioning everyone they knew, including friends, relatives, and associates. James had been a steady presence in Hannah's life since she was born and was like a father to her, a fact that the entire Anderson family respected. Most people believed that someone outside of their circle had caused harm and taken them, but no one had any idea who that person might be. As of August 5th, neither James nor Hannah could be found and their phones had not been used. The media published their photos and detailed descriptions, asking the public to report any sightings of them. California's alert system was functioning properly, ready to issue notifications nationwide through the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. With no other potential suspects, the focus of the investigation turned to James. The discovery of several trash bags filled with new camping gear in the garage's attic space suggested he had been preparing to live in the wilderness. The seized items included a portable stove, packaging from a hunting knife, and a box of handcuffs, leading investigators to suspect that James had taken Hannah to a remote area, possibly planning to escape to Mexico or Canada. The search also uncovered other concerning items, including explosives, gasoline containers, and a tarp. Authorities also found numerous letters written by Hannah that James had saved for unknown reasons, the details of which were kept confidential. The investigation aimed to determine why James might have abducted Hannah. It was soon discovered that the fire had been intentionally set using an explosive device with detonators, indicating that the act was premeditated. James' acquaintances have confirmed that he has in the wilderness survival skills, suggesting that he may be evading capture in the wilderness with Hannah. The case gained international attention in 2013 and led to a global search for James. At a press conference, Brett directly appealed to James, asking him to release his daughter. He urged his former friend to spare Hannah's life, given that he had already lost so much. The investigation found surveillance footage from the Pine Valley checkpoint, which is near James's home. The footage showed James's vehicle with Hannah visibly sitting next to him on August 4th. This sighting occurred before the fire but after Hannah was last seen, offering some hope for her well-being. By the time James picked up Hannah from middle school at 4 p.m., their phones were already turned off. Despite this, records showed that James and Hannah had made 13 phone calls to each other beforehand. The discovery of Hannah's letters in James's attic and their shared outings sparked media speculation about a possible connection between he and Hannah. Marissa provided a significant clue to investigators, recounting a car trip in which James's behavior seemed unusual. During this trip, James shared up about his strong feelings for Hannah, suggesting that he wanted to pursue a romantic relationship with her. This story portrayed James as being intensely infatuated with Hannah. As Hannah matured and began to create some distance between them, investigators speculated that James's intense infatuation could have driven him to extreme and impulsive actions. His motivation, according to this theory, was to keep Hannah isolated from others. This motivation may have led to the arson, and possibly even to Christina's death. It's possible that Christina witnessed something between James and Hannah that made her a threat to James's unrealistic plans, ultimately leading to her tragic demise. A new break in the case occurred Wednesday, August 7th, in Idaho. On the previous day, a group of experienced outdoor enthusiasts, consisting of a 71-year-old former sheriff named Mark John, his spouse, and another couple, went on a horseback ride in the remote Boise National Forest. This area, known as the River of No Return, is notorious for its challenging terrain. During their ride, they came across two hikers, a man and a young woman, who stood out for their unusual clothing. The girl was wearing pajamas and tennis shoes, while the man wore a gray sweatshirt and sneakers. Neither hiker had any rain gear, and they had set up camp on a ridge with no access to water, indicating that they were inexperienced with hiking. This thing notable for the man's behavior, as he pulled the girl close, and their intentional avoidance of interaction with others. In addition, they see the girl was holding a cat in her arms. What those who saw them at the time didn't know was that the couple were the main character of a nationwide search. It wasn't until after they returned home and watched a news report about James and Hannah that they realized who the couple was. This prompted them to immediately contact law enforcement. The fact that the girl held a cat was a particularly significant clue, as it matched the description of James's household, where a cat had gone missing following the tragic fire, a pet shared between Hannah and him. On Friday, a large group of law enforcement officers gathered in Cascade, Idaho, to search a rugged area near the River of No Return. This difficult-to-reach terrain covers a vast area with dense forests, towering mountains, and deep valleys, causing cell phone signals to be undetectable, making it an ideal place to hide. A search team consisting of state police, FBI agents, and local law enforcement thoroughly searched over 400 miles of this challenging landscape. The team discovered a blue Nissan, easily noticeable due to its missing license plates. The vehicle was quickly identified as belonging to James, despite being disguised with branches, leaves, and other natural cover. On Saturday, August 10, 2013, a U.S. Marshal Service aircraft carrying out an aerial reconnaissance mission over the forest north of McKay Lake made a significant discovery. The crew spotted a two-person blue tent and two individuals near the lake. A man was removing his shirt, while a woman stood nearby. Notably, the woman caught the pilot's attention by desperately signaling for help with a piece of fabric during the flyover. The two individuals were later identified as James and Hannah, marking a crucial turning point in the search operation. The FBI's hostage rescue team carefully positioned themselves in the area, waiting for the right moment to rescue Hannah from her captor. As the sun began to set, the team saw their chance. When James, Hannah's abductor, went into the forest to gather more firewood, the team made their move. Hannah quickly spotted and ran towards her rescuers. However, James, Hannah's captor, also saw the rescue team. He immediately fired his gun, and the team responded by returning fire. James was struck by multiple bullets and, despite attempts to save him, succumbed to his injuries. Once Hannah reached the safety of the rescue team, she seemed physically unharmed, but was visibly shocked. She clung tightly to the agents, her eyes fixed and her body trembling. The rescue team immediately flew Hannah to a nearby hospital in Idaho, where her father was waiting for her arrival. Unfortunately, before Brett arrived, the FBI shared devastating news with Hannah. Her mother and brother had not survived the fire. Hannah was now prepared to give a statement to the authorities about what happened, but without James to confirm her account, some details would remain unclear. Hannah recalled that the event started on August 3rd, when James hosted a farewell gathering at his home before leaving for Texas. Christina, Ethan, and their dog attended, but Hannah not to go. When Hannah found out that James would be picking her up instead of her mother, she felt uneasy. During the car ride, he got lost on the way to meet her, and Hannah had to call him multiple times to guide him to the correct location. Hannah initially felt at ease with James, as they shared laughter and jokes. However, upon entering his home, she noticed something odd. Her mother and younger brother were nowhere to be found, despite their belongings being scattered around. Her concern grew as she saw her mother's purse, still containing money and cards, abandoned on the floor. James's demeanor then changed drastically, and he presented Hannah with handcuffs, his eyes now empty and emotionless, as if someone or something else was controlling him. She had never seen him act this way before, and his sudden change was unnerving. James tried to reassure her that her younger mother and brother were safe, claiming they were in the garage with the dog and urging her not to worry. But after being forced to take several pills, Hannah eventually lost consciousness. Hannah woke up in James's car, surrounded by empty Red Bull cans. She soon fell asleep again, likely due to a sleeping medication. Earlier, James had threatened to retaliate if she tried to signal for help, leaving her fearful of attempting escape. Even in private moments, James kept a close watch on her while they were in the forest. Hannah found the thought of escaping nearly impossible due to the heavy rain, her inadequate clothing, and the discomfort of carrying a heavy backpack. Lacking wilderness survival skills, she felt completely hopeless and unsure of how to escape her situation. However, taking advantage of the opportunity when James was obscured by trees, she took the chance to signal for help to a passing plane from the U.S. Marshal Service. The question remains unanswered as to why Hannah was still wearing her pajamas, as it is known she was at school earlier that day. She spent several days recovering in a hospital before returning to San Diego with her father. The Anderson family struggled to protect Hannah from the invasive media attention she received. However, Brett Anderson, despite his own immense pain and loss, showed remarkable resilience. He felt comforted watching his daughter grow up and move on to a happy, fulfilling life. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Tristan Borlase. Jeffrey Borlase, Tristan's father, was born on April 16, 1975. He was the pastor of the Conservative Baptist Bible Fellowship Church, a Protestant religious movement with Mennonite roots. Tristan was raised in an environment where personal piety was of utmost importance, and there was a constant sense of being under the strict and watchful eye of God. The foundation of his upbringing was the serious and careful study of the Bible, regular church attendance, and moral instruction. Any form of entertainment, even laughter and colorful clothing, was frowned upon. Good works, charity, missionary work, love for enemies, and the renunciation of all kinds of violence were considered virtuous. Jeffrey was raised by his father, Pastor Harry Boras, and developed a kind, loving, gentle, and patient personality. As a young man, Jeffrey got a summer job at the Big Surf Water Park in Missouri. On his first day, he met Tanya, a charming and meek girl of the same age. They shared similar views and upbringings, having grown up in families where Christian values were paramount. Tanya, a patient, humble, and selfless girl, saw in Jeffrey an ideal future husband and caring father. She gave him a picture of an elderly couple holding hands, saying that would be them one day. Kathy, Jeffrey's mother, fervently prayed that God would bless her son with a wife who loved the Lord wholeheartedly. She believed her prayers were answered when Jeffrey married a young woman who shared their strong Christian faith. The newlyweds' family became a continuation of the ideals they were raised with. Tanya carefully preserved the cherished photograph of the family in their album. Soon, the young couple welcomed their first child, a delightful daughter named Taylor. Over time, 3 more children were born, the youngest being a son they named Tristan. Taylor became a caring and supportive big sister to her siblings. She was especially close with her younger brother Tristan, and they bonded over shared interests like sports, music, and mischief. The family believed that raising children meant nurturing their spiritual growth and fostering a connection with God. As the original 4 children grew older, the parents decided to expand their family by adopting 4 more boys from an orphanage, fulfilling their Christian obligation. Open, loving, and friendly to everyone, the family becomes more crowded. According to the family's religious beliefs, children were prohibited from using cell phones and social media until a certain age, and asceticism in needs and desires was encouraged. The children were prohibited from dating girls until the end of high school, that is, until the age of 18. The study of the Bible and other religious matters were mandatory, otherwise, the children would grow up like any other child. The parents did not distinguish between their native and adopted children, they all received the same attention, care, and affection. Tanya created a harmonious atmosphere and carefully monitored the internal order and relationships between siblings. She prayed a lot and did good deeds. Jeffrey and Tanya believed that virtue should be cultivated through their own actions, and they taught their children mercy through example. When the people of Haiti were hit by a hurricane, Tanya sold her expensive wedding ring and sent the money to a foundation that was building homes for the victims. In exchange, she bought a simple and cheaper ring. In 2015, Taylor graduated from high school and moved to Boone to attend Appalachian State University. This event left Tristan deeply saddened. He was left alone. Tristan had rebelled against the restrictions imposed on him since childhood and disagreed with his parents' religious beliefs. He was frustrated by the lack of a cell phone and the inability to communicate with his peers on social networks, considering such communication an integral part of modern teenage life. After Taylor's departure, conflicts with his parents became more frequent. In December 2017, there were positive changes in the family's life. Jeffrey, his wife, and their children moved to a new house with a large lot in Deep Gap, Watauga County, North Carolina. The house was located on a dirt road leading into a wooded area and was significantly more spacious than their previous residence. The new home was just under 2 miles from Tanya's mother, Robin's house. The proximity made Jeffrey easy to go to her for help with the younger children whenever needed. It's unclear whether the move was a pleasant change for Tristan, as he had to change schools and environment. In Watauga, he attended the local high school and joined the track team. Other children managed to get jobs as camp counselors during the summer. At first glance, it might seem like there were no issues in the Borlase household, but that wasn't the case. Tristan's behavior became increasingly concerning over time. In 2018, the school required several consultations with a psychologist to address issues with anger management and impulsive behavior. By 2019, when Tristan was in high school, he began to struggle with certain academic subjects, despite his strong abilities. These academic difficulties only worsened as time passed. The transition had transformed Tristan from a diligent, engaged student to an indifferent, withdrawn teenager who lost interest in his studies. Tristan started skipping classes a lot and showed no interest in learning. During lessons, he would put on his headphones and look checked out. Some teachers tried to help him, but he remained indifferent and unengaged. Tristan's behavior at home was also an issue. He often argued with his parents about getting his own phone and using social media. Tristan spent a lot of time online, and on Instagram he described himself as a musician. Taylor closely followed her siblings' lives and noticed that Tristan frequently argued with his parents, especially his mother, about religious topics. She also learned that Tristan had other issues at school. Though Taylor tried to talk to her younger brother, the closeness they once shared had faded. After some time, Tristan befriended a girl from their religious community, Evelyn Faith Jackson. They started meeting up, disregarding the prohibition on intimate relations. Occasionally, they even smoked prohibited substances. Tristan also complained about his mother, who would discuss his behavior with him at night, leaving him tired and unable to focus in school. He was very concerned that he had many flaws that prevented him from meeting his mother's expectations and that she could not be proud of him. On April 10, 2019, many secret things about Tristan's life came to light. Surveillance cameras were installed in the goat pen, and Tristan's old mobile phone, which he sometimes used secretly, was revealed. That day, Tanya took the phone for some reason and read text messages in which her son was having sexual conversations with girls and discussing illegal drugs with them. His parents contacted him through a family chat, informing him about information found on his old phone. That same day, Sherry King, Tristan's English teacher, called his mother to express concerns about his grades and behavior. Tristan's mother called back and stated that she and her husband would arrive at the school soon to discuss Tristan's grades with him. Sherry King then relayed this information to Tristan, who was greatly surprised by the news. Tristan's parents went to the high school to attend to what was going on. Tristan's conversation with his mother revolved around several crucial topics. They discussed the importance of academic success, maintaining appropriate relationships with girls, and the dangers of illegal drugs. His mother also expressed her preference for him to only study Christianity, rather than exploring other religions. Tristan felt compelled to listen and recognized areas where he needed improvement. Together, they compiled a list of desirable qualities, such as compassion and honesty. At one point, Tristan's mother approached him from behind, placed her arm around his neck, and applied pressure. This action prompted Tristan to instinctively react, causing him to turn around and accidentally elbow his mother. According to him, his mother had never done something like that, and that's why he reacted that way. His mother was startled by the blow, grabbed what he thought were a pair of scissors from a shelf, and approached her son. He, in a state of shock at what was happening, stabbed her, believing he was defending himself, and ran to get help from his father. That day, Tristan arrived at his grandmother's, Robin, around 8:30 p.m. to pick up his younger brother, who found this unusual. Tristan explained their parents urgently needed to go to the store. 20 minutes later, another sibling called Robin, saying that he couldn't reach his parents and that they hadn't picked him up after work. Robin then called another child, Alexis, and asked her to pick up her brother, after which they agreed to meet at Jeffrey and Tanya's house to investigate. As they approached the house, Robin saw blood on the porch. Inside, blood was everywhere. Alexis found a body under the hammock and saw Tristan with blood on his face fleeing. Alexis called emergency services, who advised the family to lock themselves in the car until the police arrived. The police arrived 10 minutes later. After waiting and talking to officers, they were taken to the station and informed that Jeffrey and Tanya had been found dead. Tristan contacted his girlfriend Evelyn and came to her place. She noticed that he seemed concerned and had some scratches on his forehead and arms. However, Tristan assured her that he had just had an argument with his parents and got the scratches from playing with his dog. Evelyn described Tristan's injuries as 3 scratches on his forehead, a wound on his hand, a cut on his finger, and a bruised fingernail. Tristan posted a photo of his injuries on Snapchat right after the incident, claiming he was hurt by his father's dog. His girlfriend confirmed that the photo matched the injuries she had observed on him that evening. Tristan spent the night at his girlfriend's place, and the next morning, they went to Walmart and McDonald's, initially planning to go to school but then changed their minds. Evelyn believed that Tristan wanted to get away from his parents for some time, so she offered for him to stay with one of her relatives. Tristan agreed, and they traveled to another state. On April 11th, the sheriff's office personnel obtained access to the video surveillance system at the Realis home. They reviewed the footage and learned the details of the crime. Police then obtained a warrant for Tristan's arrest and reported details of the vehicle he allegedly used to commit the crime to the National Crime Information Center. Inspector Matthew receives information that Tristan has been seen in Tennessee and begins the process of arresting him. Tristan was driving a car with Evelyn when he noticed blue police lights following them. He sped up in an attempt to evade the police. However, he eventually pulled over and the car was surrounded by police cars. Evelyn was confused to see her boyfriend being handcuffed and taken away in a squad car. During his interview with investigator Matthew on April 11, 2019, Tristan remained calm and cooperative. He confessed to the crime and provided a detailed account of his actions, at times becoming emotional. Tristan Borlase, a month away from his 18th birthday, was taken into custody without bail. The sheriff's office obtained a warrant to investigate Tristan's Snapchat account and 5 of his cell phones, which may have contained information related to the crime. A search warrant was also issued for the Orchard Road home, where detectives found various items, including another phone, a keyboard, a pen from a safe, paper cups, a hammer, a straw, knives, a red-stained swab, eyeglasses, a kitchen towel, a hammock, a digital video recorder, a rug, and miscellaneous papers, South Dakota cards, and boots. Additionally, a search warrant was issued for the Ford F-150 truck, and a red-stained swab, laptop, computer charger, and steering wheel cover were seized. A warrant was issued to search the home of Tristan's girlfriend in Boone, where he was spending the night. Investigators seized a pillowcase, a zippered sweatshirt, and a notebook from the house. Funeral services for Jeffrey and Tanya were held on April 17, 2019, at Bible Fellowship Church, officiated by Pastors William and Brad Gray. The children, despite the devastating loss of their parents at a young age, found the strength to write a touching obituary. Our parents never got the opportunity to live for themselves because they always lived for us. Jeffrey and Tanya have always been an incredible joy to their parents and always a source of pride. Our parents made the world a better place, and we hope to continue that legacy by passionately loving people and pursuing Jesus. After the funeral, Taylor visited her younger brother in prison for the first time and was unpleasantly struck by his behavior. Tristan not only showed no remorse, but even tried to blame the family for what had happened. It seemed to her sister that he was convinced he would regain his freedom sooner or later. Taylor felt disgusted, turned around, and left. Her second visit took place on May 11th, on Tristan's birthday. This time she came with Robin, but the meeting did not differ significantly from the previous one. Her brother boasted about the celebration that had been held in his honor in the prison for his birthday. Taylor found his behavior unacceptable, especially since her parents had tragically passed away. After this visit, the family decided to cut off all contact with Tristan. According to the neighbors, they heard loud screams on the Borlase home. After the incident, Tristan returned to the house and vomited, which, according to the psychologist's opinion, indicated severe stress rather than cold-blooded, calculated murder. However, the jury disagreed with the psychologist's assessment. They had access to the forensic medical examiner reports presented at the trial. Jeffrey's autopsy report noted multiple stab wounds to his left chest and back, slash wounds to his arms and hands, as well as abrasions to his skull and forehead. Tanya's autopsy report indicated that she suffered multiple stab wounds, including to her left chest, back, and arm, as well as injuries that may have been sustained when her neck was compressed. The results suggest that the parents were defending themselves, not attacking. The psychologist concluded that Tristan Borlase was mentally sane at the time of the crime, but he was experiencing a severely impaired cognitive state, including depersonalization, derealization, and a feeling that the events were unreal. However, the court and jury rejected the psychologist's opinion, finding Tristan to be a skillful manipulator and a socially dangerous individual. The trial began on February 16, 2022. During the trial, Tristan expressed remorse for what had happened. He agreed with everything his family had said about him and supported the decision for a permanent restraining order so that the family would feel safe. On March 3rd, Tristan Borlase was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for each count of first-degree murder. Hakeem Horn, the judge, acknowledged that Tristan Borlase's mental health issues were a somewhat extenuating circumstance. The psychologist's assessment revealed that Tristan was still grappling with anxiety, depression, and symptoms akin to post-traumatic stress disorder. However, the judge noted that the psychologist found no signs of psychotic disorders, although Tristan's anxiety and depression may have been exacerbated by his ongoing use of illegal substances. The most unusual fact in this story is that neither Tristan's family, nor his lawyer, nor Tristan himself made any statements about the motives that led to the crime. There was a devout family and a socially dangerous man who consumed illegal drugs, who did not fully understand the reasons for what happened and did not properly express the misunderstanding. On the one hand, there was a young man with low self-esteem, prone to depression, who showed signs of anxiety and did not receive the necessary qualified medical attention. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Ronald Platt. On July 28, 1996, in South England, Captain John Kopek and his son prepared for a day of fishing on their Brixham trawler, Mulcahy. After an unproductive day, they decided to venture further into an area known as the Roughs. They lowered their net into the water and waited. Soon, they felt the familiar pull of a heavy catch. John thought they had caught a big fish and decided to bring the net back to the surface. However, it wasn't a fish. John and his son were shocked and a dead body fell onto their deck. John quickly notified the Brixham Coast Guard. The body was badly decomposed, indicating it had been in the ocean for a while. Although fish had nibbled on it, the man was dressed neatly in a long-sleeved shirt, corduroy pants, and brown shoes. The police observed that his pockets were emptied, and he had no identification. The only distinguishing features were a badly smudged tattoo on his right hand and a Rolex watch on his wrist. The body was transferred to the medical examiner's office in Devon. It was estimated that the man was between 40 and 50 years old. The tattoo looked like a group of stars. The only serious injury was on his head. It was not fatal and, along with other bruises, appeared to be consistent with having been dragged along the seabed before being brought onto the boat. His lungs were filled with water. It was determined that he died from drowning, something common in the area given that the English Channel is right off the coast. The police suspected he might have fallen overboard during one of the ferry crossings. The only other way to identify him was through dental records. If he was a British citizen, his records would be available, so the examiner proceeded with this method. However, it would take some time. By chance, a mortuary technician noticed the man's watch. It was a Rolex Oyster self-winding watch, fully waterproof and needing motion to stay active for 48 hours. They could trace the ownership if it was genuine. By examining the watch, the investigators could determine that the man drowned on July 20, 1996, because the calendar feature showed the date as July 22. They also found a serial number hidden between the strap and the watch face. This number was sent to Rolex to check if the watch was authentic and if it had been serviced by the owner. Several weeks later, investigators identified him as Ronald Joseph Platt through Rolex records. The medical examiner confirmed this with dental records. Ronald Joseph Platt was a 51-year-old TV repairman. Records show he was born in Calgary, Canada, in 1945 before his family relocated to Britain. Ronald was unmarried and had previously served as a soldier in the British Army for his national service. Close friends described him as a quiet, introverted man. He loves his native Canada very much. He is also passionate about electronics and precision engineering, which led him to purchase a Rolex in Germany in 1967. It became one of his most treasured possessions. And his ex-partners noted that he would not even remove his watch to shower. With this information, investigators needed to determine Ronald how he ended up entangled in a fishing trawler. Detective Constable Ian Clenahan from the Devon and Cornwall Police was assigned to the case right from the start. Police discovered that Ronald's last known address was in Essex, far from where his body was found. Clenahan contacted the Essex Police Department for further investigation. Inspector Peter Redmond offered to go to the address to help investigate the case. When Peter visited, the house was empty. He contacted the owner, who explained that the previous occupant had moved out some time ago, but provided the detective with a reference letter. The letter contained the forwarding address and contact number for someone named David Davis. Upon calling the provided number, Peter was able to reach David. The detective inquired about the relationship between Ronald and David before explaining that the body they discovered in Devon was possibly that of his friend. David agreed to visit the Essex police. Peter met with him and found he to be friendly and confident. However, David was quiet and didn't ask many questions about Ronald's death or how it was discovered. When asked, David mentioned that he and Ronald had been friends for several years. He told Peter that he hadn't seen Ronald in over 3 months. The last time they met, he had lent Ronald money to start an electrical business in France. David believed that Ronald had been living in France all this time. During the interview, Peter discovered that the tattoo on Ronald's hand was a maple leaf, the national symbol of Canada. David explained Ronald's affection for Canada. After sharing all the information he had, he left the station, promising to send Detective Peter a photo of Ronald. A few days later, Peter received the photo as promised. The Essex police had been able to conclude the investigation, arriving at the theory that Ronald had fallen overboard and drowned in the canal. This matched the story told by David. It had simply been an unfortunate accident. While the Essex case was being closed, Detective Constable Ian Clenahan needed to resolve the loose ends on his side. He tried to contact David several times, but was unsuccessful. So, he turned to his colleague Peter in Essex for help in getting in touch with David. Then Peter agreed and visited David. The meeting took place in the rural area of Essex, where there were only 4 houses, each with a name instead of a traditional number. Peter knocked on the first door, and an elderly couple answered. When they asked Peter whom he was looking for, he gave them the name David Davis. The couple informed Peter that their neighbor was not Davis, but Ronald Platt. They then described Ronald to Peter, and he realized that it was the same man he had met before. Redmond realized something was amiss. He reached out to Clenahan in Devon and shared how, by pure luck, he knew more another part of the story. Detectives from both areas now understood that the situation was more complicated than at first. Peter turned his attention to collecting details about David, the man impersonating his deceased friend, Ronald. Then Peter returned to visit the elderly couple he knew as Frank and Aubrey. They recounted the story of Ronald Platt, his much younger wife, and their 2 young children. Ronald and his family often vacationed in Devon because they had a yacht there, but the specific name of the place couldn't be recalled. In Devon, Clennahan began reviewing the evidence and started by interviewing old witnesses. His first visit was to John. When questioned, John explained that the net used had pulled up a 10-pound anchor along with Ronald's body. John had given the anchor to a friend, who then passed it to his mother to sell. Luckily, the anchor wasn't sold, allowing investigators to recover and preserve it as evidence. Clennahan's next step was to interview people who knew Ronald. He reached out to Ronald's brother Brian, who mentioned Elaine Boyes, Ronald's former partner of 13 years. Investigators visited Elaine and uncovered the link between Ronald and David. Elaine had met David in 1991 while she was working as a receptionist at a fine arts auction house in Harrogate, England. She described David as tall, engaging, and charming. They then talked about David moving to Yorkshire and the subject turned to jobs. David wanted Elaine to join his company. Elaine mentioned it would be temporary because she and Ronald were planning to move to Canada. David, trying to win her over, suggested he could help them save money for the move. Soon, Elaine started working as his executive assistant and later introduced Ronald to David, leading the 2 men to quickly become friends. Ronald and Elaine was fascinated by David's boastful stories and admired his luxurious lifestyle. David offered them to become directors of his company, the Cavendish Corporation. Initially, Elaine was hesitant about the offer. David explained why he didn't want his name associated with the company. He claimed that his ex-wife was a wealthy doctor in New York who continued to demand alimony from him. At this point, Ronald and Elaine had come to trust David and believed that David was actually trying to keep distance himself from his ex-wife. David sends Elaine and Ronald to Europe to negotiate deals on his behalf and gradually draws them into his plot. On Christmas Day 1992, David invited the couple to spend the day with him and his daughter Noelle. After a satisfying meal, they sat down to exchange gifts. Elaine received a card titled "The Ultimate Gift." David had promised to buy Elaine and Ronald 2 tickets to Canada if they used them before February 1993. Elaine felt overwhelmed by the short notice, but Ronald was ecstatic. His lifelong dream of returning to Canada was coming true, thanks to the generosity of David, a man he considered a true friend. David persuaded them that it was better to begin their new life sooner rather. He quickly started preparing for their departure. David suggested to both Elaine and Ronald that they should have stamps made of their signatures, in case he needed to sign any documents urgently. David would also keep their driver's licenses with him in case he needed to prove their identity. This request wasn't difficult for the couple because they trusted David, who had just helped them get started. So, in February 1993, Elaine and Ronald flew to Canada to start their new lives. Canada did not provide the better opportunities Elaine and Ronald had hoped for. They arrived in the country during winter, found little work, and financial struggles quickly led to relationship issues. They attempted to overcome these challenges, but the increasing tension caused them to grow apart. 5 months later, Elaine went back to England to be a bridesmaid at her sister's wedding, with no plans to return to Canada. David, now a family friend, was invited to the wedding. At the event, he spoke with Elaine and asked about Ronald. He was saddened to learn that she would not be going back to Canada and that her relationship with Ronald had ended. David attempted to persuade Elaine to reconsider and give Ronald another chance in Canada. When she declined, David suddenly changed tactics. He quickly arranged to move himself, leaving Elaine only with his mobile number. Their friendship eventually faded, and the calls stopped as well. Elaine and Ronald were no longer in touch. After leaving Canada, she had not communicated with her ex-lover Ronald or her former close friend David. So, when David reached out to Elaine late in 1996, she didn't think much of the unexpected conversation, as they had little to say to each other after such a long time. David did not mention Ronald, and that was the end of it. He did not tell her that Ronald had died. After the interview, Elaine told the police she suspected David might have been involved in Ronald's death. Elaine provided important clues about the relationship between David and Ronald, but investigators needed more concrete evidence. They started interviewing witnesses after the wedding in Harrogate. David quickly fled with his family to Devon, where he began using the name Ronald Platt. He introduced his pregnant daughter as his wife, sometimes calling her Elaine Boys and other times Noelle Platt. It was well known that he owned a yacht, which raised further suspicion. Witnesses reported seeing Ronald and David together a month before Ronald's body was found. They are said to have booked rooms at the Steam Packet Inn as brothers, David and Ronald Platt. By this point, the police were certain that David was lying about Ronald and what he knew about his death. They just needed one more piece of evidence. By examining David's mobile phone records, they found that calls were made from the same area where the medical examiner estimated Ronald had drowned. The Essex police planned a sting operation to arrest David on suspicion of Ronald's murder. They waited for him at the Chelmsford train station after receiving a tip-off from Elaine, who had arranged to meet David for coffee. However, David managed to slip away. Peter then was decided to drive by David's family home. In that place, Peter noticed activity, but he did not act immediately and requested reinforcements. Peter was assumed that David might be armed as they prepared to take action. A taxi arrived in the driveway, and David quickly escaped when the taxi sped off. The police chased him and eventually arrested him, pointing a gun at him. David surrendered without incident. What the police did not know was that this was just the tip of the iceberg. David was arrested, and his fingerprints were taken. Searching them in an international database revealed another twist to an already tangled plot. The fingerprints were identified as belonging to a man named Albert Johnson Walker, who was ranked number 4 on Interpol's wanted list and was Canada's most wanted fugitive. Albert's story starts in Canada, 6 years before Ronald's body was found in the Atlantic Ocean. Born in Hamilton, Ontario, on August 9, 1945, Albert always had big dreams. Although he dropped out of high school, but he worked as a bank teller and spent much of his free time socializing in Ontario. It was at a social event that he met his ex-wife, Barbara MacDonald. Albert proposed to Barbara after just a 4-day romance, and they got married in 1968. They quickly began their family, having 3 daughters and 4 sons, and raised them in Paris, Ontario. After years of assisting others with financial solutions, Albert, along with Barbara, launched a freelance bookkeeping business. The business flourished, and within a decade, it grew to 6 branches with over 30 employees. Friends were eager to invest with them, but Albert was secretly diverting their money to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland. Eventually, problems began to surface. Albert's marriage ended due to his numerous affairs. The people he swindled money from began to get suspicious, so in 1990 Walker decided to leave before the situation became more tense. He told friends he was taking their 15-year-old daughter, Sheena, on a skiing trip to Europe, and used this as a cover to escape. Barbara realized what was happening and, concerned for her daughter's safety, reported her as a missing person. The police tried to chase him, but they lost track of him in London. He assumed a new identity, taken from a client, and started going by David Wallace Davis, while Sheena was renamed Noelle. Although he managed to evade the authorities, the name David Davis was still linked to his true identity. He needed a new identity, and he had the perfect opportunity when he met Ronald Platt. Ronald had a very small circle of friends and was obsessed with living in Canada. Albert took advantage of this information. Everything was set in motion and Albert finally got the identity he needed. However, the plans fell apart when Ronald contacted Albert in 1995. Life in Canada wasn't as he had imagined it. Ronald informed Albert that he would return to Essex to settle near David. The solid foundation Albert was building started to show signs of trouble. Having two individuals named Ronald Platt in the same area with identical birth details was problematic for Albert. So, he devised a plan. He bought a yacht called Lady Jane and took his family and Ronald to Totnes in Devon to celebrate its launch. During the visit, they bought a new 10-pound anchor, which later turned out to be crucial evidence in an investigation. After returning to Essex, Albert invited Ronald back to Devon for another weekend, just two friends enjoying the coast and fishing. Albert sailed the Lady Jane out into open waters, far from the view of anyone on shore. He then struck Ronald on the head with the anchor, rendering him unconscious. Albert searched Ronald's pockets to remove any identification, secured the anchor to Ronald's belt, and threw him overboard. Albert believes it was the perfect murder. However, Albert made one critical mistake. He forgot to remove Ronald's Rolex watch, which eventually unveiled the meticulously planned crime. Albert's trial began in 1998, with evidence presented in court, including the anchor found entangled with Ronald's body in a net. Forensic experts determined that the head injury matched the shape of the anchor. Traces of zinc were found on the pants belt Ronald's, matching the zinc on the anchor. Albert had used the anchor to weigh Ronald down by attaching it to his belt. Further investigation of the Lady Jane revealed more evidence. Hairs matching Ronald's were discovered on a yacht cushion, and his fingerprint was found on the carrier bag used to transport the anchor back to the Lady Jane. Blood stains were discovered near the railway tracks at Albert's residence. The habit of accumulating documents harmed him, as they were confiscated and used to demonstrate his fraudulent businesses and deceitful activities. However, it was the testimonies of Elaine and Sheena that ultimately condemned him. Elaine's testimony demonstrated to the court that Albert stood to lose significantly if Ronald returned to England. Sheena dealt the decisive blow. She could not provide a clear alibi for Albert on the weekend of the murder. She stated that he had been on the yacht and appeared disheveled and agitated when he returned late on the murder day. Sheena's testimony marked a new phase in the investigation. She spoke in court about her life of fear with her father, his charm, and how she felt like a victim, just like anyone else who encountered him. When Albert took the stand, he appeared very charming and confident in court. He claimed that Sheena insisted on joining him and conceded to committing fraud and other illegal activities, but he firmly denied murdering Ronald. He explained that the blood found on the yacht was because Ronald had accidentally hit his head while they were fishing. Nevertheless, the jury quickly saw through his falsehoods and convicted him after only 2 hours of deliberation. High Court Justice Neil Butterfield addressed Albert, stating that the murder was carefully planned and executed with chilling efficiency. Justice Butterfield said that Albert was a plausible, intelligent, and ruthless man who posed a serious threat to anyone who stood in his way. Albert Johnson Walker was sentenced to 15 years to life in 2005 and was allowed to return to Canada to serve his sentence in 2007. At the age of 61, he was sentenced to 4 more years in prison to run concurrently with his sentence. In 2015, Albert applied for parole but withdrew his application at the last moment. Now, at age 75, the Canadian Parole Board has denied his application for day and full parole. His request to travel unaccompanied to Vancouver Island for a personal development program was also denied. It seems likely he will never be released. Albert seems to have accomplished the perfect crime. But then karma caused him to be exposed. If it weren't for Ronald Platt's real Rolex watch and a series of coincidences, he probably would have escaped legal punishment. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Heather Maples. Heather Maples, just 22 years old, has just started college, settled into a job, and feels life is full of promise. She radiates warmth and energy, and is always helpful to those around her. On the morning of August 7, 2015, Heather's coworker Kelsey Price arrived at her real estate brokerage firm in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and began her daily routine. Heather had not yet arrived at work, which did not surprise Kelsey, as Heather was notorious for being late. Kelsey began calling Heather to wake her up but received no response. The night before, Heather had planned to go to a bar with some friends and had asked Kelsey to pick her up if she overslept or did not answer the phone. Kelsey was not concerned and went to Heather's apartment to wake her up. The girls' apartments were in the same complex where they worked. When Kelsey arrived, she found the front door unlocked. When she entered, she found her friend Heather lying on the bed, sleeping on her stomach, wearing only a crop top and no underwear. Thinking that Heather had been partying the night before, Kelsey tried to wake her but received no response. She gently tapped Heather's leg to wake her up, but when she touched it, she was shocked to find it was ice cold. Terrified, Kelsey walked out of the apartment and called 911. Emergency services arrived quickly, with police officer Tommy Massey being one of the first to arrive on the scene, followed by a forensic team who thoroughly examined the apartment. They found that Heather was partially undressed and had bruises on her face. The poor girl's hair was bloody, and blood was also splattered on the walls. It was clear that she had been brutally beaten, tortured, and sexually assaulted. Heather Maples was born on August 23, 1992 in Ocala, Florida. Her mother affectionately called Heather her Storm Baby, a nickname that perfectly reflected her energy and courage. In 2004, Heather's mother, Jennifer Hunter, welcomed her second child, a son named Ryan. Heather happily embraced her new role as a big sister, however Ryan was later diagnosed with developmental delays. Heather devoted all of her free time to her brother, teaching him to talk, walk, and feed himself. Heather was in 7th grade at the time and spent the following years until Ryan's graduation with her, showing her endless love and devotion to her younger brother. At 22, Heather Maples decided to leave her hometown in Texas and start a new chapter in Tennessee to pursue her dream of becoming a psychologist. Her journey began when her old classmate Chaz called her and invited her to Murfreesboro, Tennessee, where he was a student. He described it as the perfect small town for Heather, offering her a great opportunity to prepare for college. Heather agreed and moved to Murfreesboro in January 2015. Soon after arriving, her friendship with Chaz blossomed into a romantic relationship, launching her into a new phase of her life. With the help of her best friend Kelsey, Heather got a job at the office of the housing complex where they lived. Heather was trying to balance her work and preparing for college. She had the support of her friends and family, and things seemed to be going well. However, her relationship with Chaz began to deteriorate, eventually leading to their breakup and Chaz moving out. In early August, she called her mother excitedly to share the great news: she had been accepted to college. Her mother was extremely proud of Heather's achievements. However, a week later, Heather did not show up for work, causing concern among those around her. The police realized that given the nature of the crime, it could be related to Heather's personal life. At the time, most of her friends were considered potential suspects, and there was good reason for this suspicion. After searching the apartment, the police found no signs of forced entry. This suggested that Heather may have known the attackers and may have let them in. During the investigation, several key pieces of evidence were discovered, including unidentified DNA and a hair that did not belong to Heather. These samples were sent for analysis to help identify the suspect. The most important evidence was a bloody fingerprint that was clearly found on the right side of Heather's bed. Police Tommy noted that if someone had intentionally left the stain, it would not have been so clear and precise. This fingerprint was also sent for analysis. In addition, Heather's cell phone was found in the apartment, but there was no password, so the contents could not be accessed. However, Kelsey returned the phone password to the police, and she informed Heather's mother about her death. Police Tommy hoped to gather more information about Heather from Kelsey, especially about Heather's personal life and her relationship with Chaz. Kelsey told the police that Heather's relationship with Chaz was very tense due to his lack of anger control, which often made him aggressive and unkind to Heather. Therefore, Heather chose to end the relationship. This prompted the police to start investigating Chaz. However, things took an unexpected turn when a young man named Michael tried to enter the crime scene, ignoring the warning tape. He had a key to Heather's apartment. According to Michael, the night before Heather died, she called him and invited him to dinner, and he agreed. After dinner, he went home, while Heather went to a local bar with friends. Heather then contacted Michael for help. She called me at 11:40 and said I needed to come to the bar because she really needed my help, Michael recalled. There were people hitting on her and she was upset. Okay, I'll be there, he replied. Michael explained that Heather was in trouble. A young man named Otavio had been bothering her and was aggressive. After the incident, he offered to drive Heather home. She ordered biscuit gravy, 2 eggs and sausage. Then I drove her home, he recalled. According to Michael, he last saw Heather at about 2:30 a.m. on August 7th. During questioning, he noted that Heather's front door should have been unlocked because he had her keys. She was wearing a dress that didn't have pockets for them, and he forgot to return them after unlocking the door. Michael appeared frustrated and seemingly honest, but the police still needed to get his fingerprints and DNA. The police contacted the bar to request surveillance footage, which confirmed Michael's statement during questioning. Further analysis showed that the fingerprints and DNA collected at the crime scene did not match Michael. After he was cleared as a suspect, the focus shifted to Otavio, the man who had been with Heather that night. With Kelsey's help in accessing Heather's cell phone, the police's interest in Otavio increased significantly. They found text messages from Heather to Otavio, inviting him to her apartment just hours before her death. The police asked Kelsey if she knew anything about Otavio. Kelsey didn't know much about him, but he seemed like a really nice guy with a good sense of humor. The police were puzzled as to why Heather would invite Otavio to her house after Michael had just saved her from him at the bar. The police then questioned Otavio, asking him what he had been doing yesterday afternoon. Otavio said that he had been spending time with Heather. They had some tequila and then went to the gym. The police then asked about Heather's late-night text messages. Otavio replied that she had sent him a text message around 2:30. When asked if he had seen the text message, he admitted that he had but said that he had been asleep at the time and had only seen it this morning. He reiterated that he had discovered it this morning because he had been asleep. The police pressed Otavio harder, using a rigorous interrogation technique that not all suspects could handle. Witnesses saw you enter the apartment. Phone records confirm you were there. You were with her yesterday. Otavio claims she texted him to come back and that he did not return afterwards. Otavio asks the police what happened to her, and is shocked to hear them say that she was raped and died at her home. In disbelief, he exclaims that it cannot be true. The police inform him that there is DNA all over her. Otavio is shocked by this revelation, seemingly unaware of what happened to Heather. After questioning, he readily agrees to a DNA test, believing that it will exonerate him. The results confirm his innocence as the DNA found at the crime scene does not match his, leading to his being eliminated as a suspect. With no leads, the police work almost around the clock, reviewing surveillance footage and scrutinizing every detail provided by witnesses. On the 9th day of the investigation, as Officer Tommy prepares to leave the office late at night, he receives an important call from the director of the forensics lab. Tommy finally gets the answer regarding the bloody fingerprints taken from Heather's bed. They belong to a young man named Brandon Bowling. The police then ask Brandon how he met Heather, and he says they met at the gym. Tommy starts the questioning gently, giving Brandon a chance to explain what happened that night. He asks if Brandon has ever been to her apartment, and Brandon confirms that he has. Brandon recalls that every time he has been there, she has left the door unlocked. Tommy then asks him if he has ever had sex with her. Brandon confirms that he has, and that they have had sex twice. Tommy continues to ask when was the last time he was at her apartment, and Brandon says that it was probably in July. Tommy continues to ask him why his fingerprints were on the bed, and Brandon insists that he did nothing to her. She had just been accepted to college and he was happy for her. He continues to deny any involvement in Heather's death. After questioning, the police asked Brandon to take a DNA test, arguing that if he was innocent, the test would prove it. Brandon agreed, presumably hoping to be released from police custody, but that did not happen. The police decided not to wait for the test results. They had found substantial grounds for the next step based on the fingerprint match. The police immediately filed a request with the court for permission to access Brandon's phone, which could help confirm his actions and monitor calls and texts on the night of the incident. After receiving court approval, the video from Brandon's phone was one of the most shocking discoveries, even for the most experienced police officers. In the video, Brandon recorded everything from intimate acts to beatings. Heather was still alive at the time of the recording. In February 2018, Brandon Bowling pleaded guilty to assaulting Heather Maples. He was sentenced to 40 years in prison without the possibility of parole. When the trial ended, Heather's mother, Jennifer, approached Bowling's mother in the hallway. Jennifer simply hugged the woman, saying that they had both lost children that day. Unfortunately, Brandon Bowling never explained his motives.